Chapter 1596. It's torn. Nye Tian couldn't help but exclaim in surprise when he saw the two blades of chaos tearing a crack in the flaming gate. The sharp blades formed by the chaotic flames could indeed tear the flaming gate apart. It was unknown what kind of flames the flaming gate was formed from, but it could devour almost all kinds of energy. However, it could not devour the chaotic flames formed by the fusion of the supreme flames. How is this possible? At that moment, everyone could not help but exclaim when they saw a glaring crack appear on the flaming gate. Their eyes trembled violently. Even Jian Wuya could not break the flaming gate, but Nye Tian had actually torn a crack in it. Boom! Boom! At that moment, two more balls of flames shot out from the flaming gate and pressed down on Nye Tian. However, Nye Tian did not care. He used the star soul flames to resist the attacks of the fireballs. At the same time, he focused all his attention on the flaming gate and controlled the blades of chaos to expand outwards. On the other side, the gigantic crimson serpent rolled over and attacked Nye Tian, completely ignoring the others. The giant snake seemed to be protecting the flaming gate and not letting Nye Tian tear it apart. Protect him! In an instant, Yao Chen realized what was going on. With a low roar, he slapped out with his palm. A mysterious force gushed out from his palm and turned into a halo that enveloped Nye Tian. However, it was impossible to block the giant red snake with just a small barrier. The giant red snake's body was burning with terrifying flames. Before it even touched Nye Tian, the latter could already feel the pain of being burned. Palace Masters, what are you waiting for? Yao Chen let out a furious roar and was the first to attack the huge snake. He unleashed a ferocious palm force and violently bombarded the huge body of the huge snake. Lai Yu, Jian Wuya, and Qi Yefeng, the three palace masters, finally reacted. After exchanging glances, they all took action. They did not have a good impression of Nye Tian at all. Instead, they hated him deeply. However, under such circumstances, they could only protect Nye Tian because Nye Tian was the only one who could break the flaming gate. If Nye Tian died, it would be equivalent to waiting for death. At this time, only a giant snake had appeared in the lava lake. Who knew what else would appear next? Only by breaking through the flame gate and leaving this place would they have a chance to survive. Boundless slash. Jian Wuya's figure was extremely fast. He furiously roared and released all of his sword energy. The surging sword intent condensed into a terrifying sword wave that slashed towards the giant scarlet snake. Lai Yu and Qi Yefeng also attacked at the same time. Two violent fist shadows appeared and smashed towards the giant snake. As for Yao Chen, he released a barrier to envelop Jian Wuya and the others, helping them resist the suppression of the ancient restriction. Bang! 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 The three palace lords simultaneously attacked. Three terrifying attacks bombarded the giant serpent's body, igniting balls of incomparably blazing flames. The giant serpent in mid-air seemed to have turned into a sea of fire in an instant. Even the space around it was burning. Boom! In the next moment, the giant scarlet snake suddenly flew into a rage. The flames around its body rose sharply, turning into endless waves of fire that charged in all directions. Arg! The three palace lords cried out at the same time. They were actually unable to endure the attacks of the flames and were directly launched backward. They left behind bloody streaks in the air. Although the three palace lords were overgods, they were not as powerful as imagined under the suppression of the ancient restriction. Even with Yao Chen's assistance, they were unable to fend off the giant scarlet snake. The giant snake was extremely powerful. It was basically on par with the earthen dragon from before. Hiss! After repelling the three sect masters, the giant snake flicked its forked tongue in and out of its mouth. Its crimson eyes shone with a bone-chilling coldness as it opened its mouth and spat out a pillar of fire that looked like a giant sword. The power of the giant snake was extremely terrifying. If the pillar of fire landed on Nye Tian, he would definitely die. However, Nie Tian was currently completely focused on the flame gate. He paid no attention to anything else. He had to break through the flame gate. Only then would everyone have a chance at survival. Nie Tian. Chen Wuqing could not help but shout when he saw that Nie Tian did not care about the giant snake's attack at all. His heart was in his throat. Big brother Nie Tian. At the same time, a figure flew out and flew towards Nie Tian. Its body emitted a colorful halo that was extremely dazzling. It actually enveloped Nie Tian. Battle Cloud Divine Robe. Fat Cat screamed in Nie Tian's divine sense. Its voice became sharp. At the moment of life and death, the person who came to Nie Tian's side was Yun Tian. In order to protect Nie Tian, he had no choice but to use the Battle Cloud Divine Robe. The Battle Cloud Divine Robe released balls of colorful halo that enveloped Nie Tian and protected him. Boom! Boom! In the next moment, balls of flames rushed down. However, they were blocked by the Battle Cloud Divine Robe and could not break through. When everyone saw this scene, they could not help but gasp. Their eyes were filled with shock. Even the 3 palace masters could not resist the flames released by the giant snake. How could a small ball of colorful halo be unafraid of these flames? What is this? Jian Wuya and the others stabilized their bodies and looked at the strange scene in the air. They could not help but exclaim. Could it be the legendary sacred weapon? Lai Yu and Qi Yefeng screamed. At this moment, their eyes instantly turned red. The Battle Cloud Divine Robe had attracted their attention. Battle Cloud 7 Colors, Open. At this moment, Yun Tian's figure appeared beside Nie Tian. With a low roar, the Battle Cloud Divine Robe once again released a strong colorful halo. Like a ripple, it spread into the air. Hiss hiss hiss. The colorful halo filled the air and actually forced the giant red snake to retreat again and again. It even let out an ear-piercing scream. Open for me. At this moment, Nie Tian roared. His pale face revealed a surprised smile. A passage that was several meters long and wide appeared on the flame door. The chaotic flame forcibly tore the flame door apart. Chen Wuqing, rush over. Nie Tian saw the passage appear and exclaimed, urging Chen Wuqing and the others to rush over. Nie Tian, thank you. However, before he finished speaking, a cold laugh was heard. Then, a white figure directly passed through the flame door and disappeared. Luo Xian. Although Nie Tian did not see the figure's face clearly, he guessed that it was Luo Xian. He had desperately torn open a passage, but Luo Xian actually reaped the fruits of his labor and directly passed through the passage. How could he not be angry? Luo Xian must have been paying attention for a long time, waiting for the moment when Nie Tian tore open the flame door. And in order to be foolproof, she even used the 1,000 Clouds boundary. Her speed was extremely fast. Before the others could react, she directly passed through. Damn it! Nie Tian roared, but there was nothing he could do. Beads of sweat oozed from his forehead, and the strength of his body was rapidly consumed. Although the chaotic flame cut open the flame door, he could not hold on for long. Chen Wuqing was stunned for a moment before he reacted. His figure moved and flew towards the passage of the flame door with Yang Zhongqiu and the others. Chapter 1597. Jian Wuya's figure was like a mountain. His oppressive aura was so strong that it pushed Chen Wuqing and the others away. A bunch of ants! Get out of my way! Jian Wuya roared like a madman. His aura suddenly soared and forced Chen Wuqing and the others to retreat. Bastard! Nie Tian cursed when he saw this scene. However, there was nothing he could do. He could only watch Jian Wuya pass through the door of flames. The next moment, Lai Yu's figure also moved. He flashed past and did not care about Nie Tian and the others at all. Nie Tian, you really are a good person. Standing in midair, Qi Yefeng looked down at Nie Tian and said with an embarrassed smile, I'd like to see how long you can hold on. Qi Yefeng blocked the door of flames. He did not enter and did not let anyone else enter. Obviously, Chi Yifeng saw that Nie Tian was about to reach his limit and his friends had not entered, so he had to hold on. If Chi Yifeng continued to block the door, Nie Tian might die from exhaustion. Nie Tian was drenched in sweat and his face was pale as paper. The corner of his mouth trembled and he squeezed out a few words. Chi Yifeng, you are so despicable. These palace masters were usually pretentious. However, when it came to the moment of life and death, each was more shameless than the other. There was no need to mention Jian Wuya and Lai Yu. Chi Yifeng was simply shameless. Not to mention that Nie Tian broke the door of flames and saved everyone. Chi Yifeng actually blocked the entrance and wanted to exhaust Nie Tian to death. Chi Yifeng, get out of my way! At this moment, a deep roar was heard. Yao Chen's figure suddenly rose up. He released his spirit boundary power and pressed towards Chi Yifeng. This spirit boundary power was enough to cause great pressure on Chi Yifeng. He did not dare to resist the blazing aura of the door of flames. Yao Chen, you really are in cahoots with Nie Tian. Chi Yifeng frowned and sneered. Then, he moved and entered the door of flames. He had already discovered that Yao Chen had been helping Nie Tian and the others. Although he did it secretly, he was still discovered. Go in. Seeing Chi Yifeng leave, Yao Chen shouted and let Chen Wuqing and the others go first. Chen Wuqing moved and brought Yang Zhongqiu, Nie Qiu, Ed and the others in. On the other side, the elders of Red Lunar Divine Palace and Cloud Shattering Divine Palace appeared. Nie Tian didn't recognize the elder from the Crimson Moon Divine Palace, so he flashed away. Nie Tian was no stranger to the elder of the Cloud-Splitting Divine Palace. It was Wang Xianwei. Wang Xianwei did not rush to leave. But instead, he looked and waited. A. Palace Master of the Medicine King Palace, you leave first. Nie Tian ignored Wang Xianwei and directly shouted at Yao Chen. Yao Chen solemnly nodded. His figure flickered and disappeared into the flaming door. It's my turn. Seeing that Yao Chen had already entered, Wang Xianwei suddenly let out a strange laugh. Immediately after, his figure moved and he flew towards the flaming door. Yun Tian, let's enter as well. Nie Tian had already reached his limit and could not hold on any longer. He turned to look at Yun Tian and said calmly. He was prepared to enter with Yun Tian. That large snake was extremely fearful of the Battle Cloud Divine Clothes power and did not dare to approach. Nie Tian and Yun Tian no longer hesitated. Their figures moved and they approached the flame door directly. Without the control of the Blade of Chaos, the gate of fire began to close slowly. Nie Tian and Yi Zichen instantly arrived at the side of the passageway, but at this moment, a sinister laugh rang out in the air. Nie Tian, go to hell! Wang Xian and Weiren were still in the gap of the door of flames. However, they struck out with their palms. The violent palm force ignited terrifying flames and blasted towards Nie Tian and Wang Xian. Wang Xianwei was the last to leave, all for this moment. He wanted to kill Nie Tian at the last moment. Despicable villain! Yun Tian was taken aback. With a low growl, the Battle Cloud Divine Clothes released a colorful halo. However, it could not withstand the impact of the palm force and his figure was forced to retreat. Yun Tian! Seeing this, Nie Tian exclaimed. Immediately after, he moved and forcefully pulled Yun Tian back. Goodbye, Nie Tian! Wang Xianwei forced Nie Tian and Yun Tian to retreat. With a sinister smile, his figure disappeared into the flame door. He wanted to force both Nie Tian and Yun Tian to stay here. That giant snake would help him kill Nie Tian. Despicable! Nie Tian growled. Seeing that the flame door was about to close, there was only a gap left. It was impossible for anyone to pass through. In a moment of desperation, Nie Tian raised both of his hands. The Blade of Chaos appeared once again and forcefully blocked the closing flame door. Yun Tian, get in now! Nie Tian used the last bit of his strength to forcefully open the flame door for Yun Tian to enter. Brother Nie Tian! Yun Tian saw that Nye Tian's skin had cracked inch by inch. Obviously, he had reached the limit of his martial body and could not hold on any longer. He could not help but shout, "Get in!" Nye Tian's eyes were red and his eyeballs were about to pop out. He roared in a deep voice. Without hesitation, Yun Tian dashed towards the flame door and disappeared instantly. "Nye Tian, this is your last chance. Hurry!" In the next moment, Fat Cat's voice was heard anxiously. However, at this moment, Nye Tian had reached his limit. Even his divine sense was a little blurred. With the last bit of consciousness, Nye Tian's figure approached the flame door. However, his speed was too slow. The flame door was closing at an extremely fast speed. "Oh no!" Seeing this, Fat Cat let out a strange cry, sounding extremely mournful. "A bunch of bastards!" Fat Cat could not help but curse in grief and indignation when he felt the real aura of death. If not for the palace masters and Wang Xianwei, Nye Tian would definitely be able to enter the flame door. But now it was too late. At the moment when his figure approached the flame door, Nye Tian could no longer hold on and directly fainted. "Damn it, I'm going all out!" Seeing that Nye Tian had fainted, Fat Cat angrily cursed. At the same time, his figure moved and appeared beside Nye Tian. He actually pushed Nye Tian directly into the flame door. The last chance, Fat Cat could only gamble once. He bet that Nye Tian's divine and demon origin embryo could withstand the burning of the flame door. At this time, the flame door was completely closed. Fat Cat wanted Nye Tian to go through the flame door without any protection. GGG. Just as Nye Tian's body was about to enter the flaming gate, a sinister, strange laughter came from the flaming gate. Then, a ghostly face appeared on the flaming gate and said with a sinister laugh, "The fiend god nascent embryo, and it has merged with the dual supreme flames. No wonder it can break the golden flame gate. Such a talented little guy, if you die like this, wouldn't it be a pity?" "You!" Little Fat Cat suddenly saw the ghostly face on the flaming door, and seemed to have sensed something terrifying. It cried out in shock, and was speechless. "He is the Emperor of the Underworld." Almost at the same time, Disher Tian's voice also sounded, revealing great fear. Chapter 1598. Boom! Inside the door of fire, a giant flaming hand appeared and pulled Nye Tian into the door, igniting a sea of fire. Ah! In an instant, the pain of being burned by the fire hit him, causing Nye Tian to let out a shrill cry. Then, he regained consciousness. What is this place?" Nye Tian abruptly opened his eyes, and to his surprise, he discovered that he was in a strange space. Raging flames were surging around him, while he was wrapped in a strange shield, which prevented him from being harmed by the raging flames. The original embryo of the demon and god. Not bad indeed. Your recovery ability is also very scary. You actually woke up right away. Just then, a strange voice arose. Then, a silhouette appeared before Nye Tian. It was extremely strange. Who are you?" Nye Tian stared at the silhouette before him and asked in a trembling voice. The person before him was very strange. His entire body was burning with terrifying flames, as if his body was made of fire itself. The original embryo of the demon and god. "I am very curious. Why do you have the same thing as me?" The man in flames did not answer Nye Tian's question. Instead, he laughed, as if he was very interested. "The same thing as you?" Nye Tian was startled. He could not see how he was similar to this man in flames. "Yes." The man in flames nodded slightly and said in a low voice, "Why does your blood have the breath of the Emperor of the Underworld?" The Emperor of the Underworld! Nye Tian was stunned again. His expression froze for a moment. After his expression froze for a few seconds, Nye Tian finally calmed down. He could feel the energy in his body slowly recovering. He could not help but frown. The breath of the man in flames seemed a little familiar. Share. In the next second, Nye Tian suddenly screamed. His face was full of fear. He could feel the same breath from the man in flames as Cher. You are the Emperor of the Underworld? Nie Tian reacted instantly and screamed. I am not the Emperor of the Underworld. However, the flaming man's reaction was very calm. He said lightly, It's just a minor relationship with the Underworld Emperor. Nie Tian swallowed his saliva, his eyes trembling uncontrollably. He didn't know what the relationship between the flaming man in front of him, the Emperor of the Underworld, and Cher was. All of this was too strange. Fiend God nascent embryo. It seems like you've seen someone with the bloodline of the Netherworld Emperor. The man of fire chuckled, but he wasn't too interested. After a moment of thought, he said, I am Lai Yin Jiufeng. I would like to make a deal with you. Nie Tian's eyes focused slightly. He said darkly, Lai Yin Jiufeng, just who are you? Lai Yin Jiufeng laughed and said, Who I am is not important. If you must know, that little cat will tell you. What you need to consider now is, do you want to make a deal with me? What deal? Nie Tian was stunned for a moment before he asked in a deep voice. Save each other. Lai Yin Jiufeng smiled faintly. Then, he moved next to Nie Tian and stared at Nie Tian with his fiery eyes. Suddenly, the corner of his lips curled up. He said, You are a smart person. I'm sure you will agree. Just say it. Nie Tian exhaled deeply when he felt Lai Yin Jiufeng's burning aura. He said coldly. He didn't know why, but he felt that Lai Yin Jiufeng had an extremely evil aura. Although Lai Yin Jiufeng and Cher both possessed the bloodline of the Emperor of the Netherworld, they seemed to be polar opposites. Cher was holy at the extreme, and Lai Yin Jiufeng was evil at the extreme. I guarantee that you won't die here, and you will break through the door of golden flames. It's that simple, Lai Yin Jiufeng said indifferently and stated his conditions. Nie Tian was stunned for a moment before he realized something. He smiled and said, So this door is called the Door of Golden Flames. You're trapped inside the Door of Golden Flames, aren't you? Smart. Lai Yin Jiufeng smiled faintly and said, I like dealing with smart people. You don't need to ask me why I'm trapped here, and I won't ask you why you're here. We're just making a deal, and we don't owe each other anything once the deal is over. What do you think? Nie Tian frowned. He didn't think that Lai Yin Jiufeng would know so much. He even knew about the 9 dragons' earth vein. Nie Tian thought quickly. He was very worried that Lai Yin Jiufeng would fight him for the 9 dragons' earth vein if he escaped the door of golden flames. You don't need to worry about the fiend god nascent embryo. The door of golden flames contains a spacetime gate. I'll leave immediately if you break the seal. As for the 9 dragons' earth vein, I'm not interested. Lai Yin Jiufeng smiled faintly. He knew exactly what Nie Tian was thinking. Not interested? Nie Tian laughed and said, Is there anyone in this world who isn't interested in the 9 dragons' earth vein? I'm not as strong as you think I am. Lai Yin Jiufeng raised an eyebrow and thought for a moment. Then, he said, I have something more important to do after I escape. What is it? Nie Tian asked. He couldn't understand what Lai Yin Jiufeng wanted to do that was more important than the 9 dragons' earth vein. You know. Lai Yin Jiufeng smiled again, but then his expression darkened. He said, I want to create the vein of 3 lives for myself. The vein of 3 lives. Nie Tian was stunned when he heard the name, but he immediately understood. Right now, Lai Yin Jiufeng was like Cher before she walked out of Destiny Nether Forest. She didn't have a Yuan vein yet, so she needed to create one. Nie Tian agreed to it. At this moment, Little Fat Cat's deep voice rang out. All right, it's a deal. Nie Tian's eyes darkened slightly. He no longer hesitated and agreed to Lai Yin Jiufeng's request. Very well, then let's begin. Lai Yin Jiufeng raised an eyebrow and smiled. Then, a profound power surged out of his body and entered Nie Tian's body. It actually healed most of Nie Tian's strength in an instant. Nie Tian was puzzled, but he didn't pay it any mind. He began to observe his surroundings. This was a world of fire. The hottest fire aura was everywhere. It was extremely terrifying. It was hard to imagine how Lai Yin Jiufeng could survive in an environment like this. This is the space inside the door of golden flames. Do you see that golden light? Lai Yin Jiufeng moved and pointed at the golden light in the sky. He said, "That golden light is where the seal is. Use your chaotic flames to destroy that golden light." Nie Tian's eyebrows furrowed and his eyes flickered. "Nie Tian, do it," Fat Cat urged Nie Tian. She seemed to be very nervous. Amen, Nie Tian nodded. Without any hesitation, he flew to the golden light and summoned 2 clusters of primal chaos flame from his palms. Then, he thrust his palms forward, and 2 blades of primal chaos whizzed out, bombarding the golden light. Kaboom! There was a muffled sound as 2 flames clashed. Blinding light shot out, and a crack appeared on the golden light. It instantly expanded and began to spread. The aura of the seal immediately dispersed and flowed into the endless flames. "Thank you, demon god embryo." Lai Yin Jiufeng's eyes shook violently when he saw this. He let out an odd laugh and charged toward the crack in the golden light. Chapter 1599. Nie Tian stared at the ball of golden light, but Lai Yin Jiufeng was nowhere to be seen. He could not help but frown in confusion. Lai Yin Jiufeng had disappeared. "There's a spatial gate in the gold flame seal." "He's already left," Fat Cat's voice rang. It sounded as if a heavy burden had been lifted from his shoulders. After staring blankly for a long time, Nie Tian finally forced himself to calm down and asked in a deep voice, "Little fatty, who is this guy?" "He's the same as Cher. You can think of him as another avatar of the Emperor of the Netherworld." Fat Cat gave a simple explanation and then said, "Let's break the gold flame seal quickly. We should leave this place as well." The barrier left behind by Lai Yin Jiufeng would not last much longer. Nie Tian had to break the gold flame seal before it disappeared. Lai Yin Jiufeng was very smart. When Nie Tian was attacking the gold flame seal, he used the moment the seal broke to escape through the spatial gate in the seal. "Yes." Nie Tian nodded gravely. He formed 2 blades of chaos again and bombarded the gold flame seal. Bang! The golden light finally could not withstand the power of the blades of chaos and collapsed with a muffled sound. The primal chaos flame had the absolute ability to suppress any fire-attributed energy. Without the flames of chaos, Nie Tian would not have been able to break the gold flame gate. Boom! The moment the gold flame seal collapsed, the flames in the sealed space immediately became violent. Then, they condensed together and turned into a blazing scarlet fireball. Golden flame firestone. When the little fat cat saw the fireball, it chuckled and said, "This is a good thing." Nie Tian was also taken aback by the sight of the crimson fireball, a puzzled look on his face. The sea of fire had turned into a fireball the size of an infant's fist after it had gathered together. The golden flame flint floated in midair, releasing scorching flames that were incomparably hot. "Fat, what is this?" Nie Tian asked after a moment of surprise. "This is called a golden flame flint. It's an extremely precious item. It contains extremely violent power of golden flames." The little fat cat chuckled and said, "With this thing, that little guy can grow into a real beast." "Gold leopardy?" Nie Tian immediately realized that the little fat cat was talking about gold leopardy. However, he remembered that Fat Cat had said before that Golden too was powerful because its blood contained the power of golden flames. In order to activate the power of golden flames, it needed to devour something called crimson gold flint. The little fat cat chuckled and said proudly, "To a golden Leo, the golden blaze flame stone is even more terrifying than the crimson gold flame stone. If it swallows this golden blaze flame stone, not only will the golden flame power in its blood awaken, but it will also accelerate its growth." Nie Tian's eyes flickered as he asked in astonishment, "Are you saying that Jean too should swallow the golden blaze flame rock directly?" "That's right." Fat Cat chuckled. Let that little guy come out. At this moment, Golden 2 was in Nye Tian's soul space. With a thought, the little guy appeared. Yeah. After Golden 2 came out, its golden body swayed. It immediately discovered the golden flame flint. Its golden eyes flickered with a burning light. It was actually very eager. Fat, it was just born not long ago. Can it really withstand the power of the golden flame flint? Nye Tian looked at Golden 2 and couldn't help but frown. Don't worry, Fat Cat said confidently. The power inside the golden flame flint is the power of golden flames. It is a very terrifying power to others, but it is harmless to Golden Tuesday. Moreover, the earlier Golden 2 awakens the power of golden flames, the stronger it will be in the future. Yeah. At this time, little Gold Kraken looked at Nye Tian with its pair of golden eyes and called out to him. It was obvious that it wanted to eat the golden blaze flint very much, but it was asking for Nye Tian's permission. Okay, go. Nye Tian smiled and nodded. The little gold banshee understood Nye Tian's meaning. Its body, which was only the size of a palm, flashed, and turned into a streak of golden light that shot towards the golden blaze flame rock. Puff! Golden 2 opened its mouth and directly swallowed the golden flame flint. Its small belly swelled up. The moment the golden flame flint entered its stomach, Golden 2's body suddenly released a golden light. It was as bright as the sun. The golden flame flint turned into a golden flame power that flowed through Golden 2's body, stimulating its terrifying potential. Golden 2 suffered a huge tearing pain in an instant. Its face turned malevolent. It bared its teeth and revealed a fierce look. Little guy, bear with it. It will be over soon. Fat Cat looked at it from the side. It was not worried at all. Instead, it smiled with satisfaction. He knew that the stronger the power produced by the golden flame flint, the stronger Golden 2's battle strength would be in the future. The pain it endured today was for it to become stronger in the future. Nye Tian looked at Golden 2's malevolent face and couldn't help but frown. This little guy was very persevering. It actually didn't cry out. After a long time, the power of golden flames slowly melted into Golden 2's blood and gradually transformed into its own power. Yeah. Golden 2's face returned to normal. It seemed to feel the increase in its strength. It cried out excitedly and jumped onto Nye Tian's shoulder. Its furry little head rubbed against Nye Tian's neck. It was very happy. Nye Tian looked at Golden 2 and discovered that the golden fur on its body was even brighter. It released a dazzling golden light and its body was also slightly bigger than before. He used his divine sense to feel Golden 2's body. He noticed that a mysterious golden power was circulating and changing Golden 2's body bit by bit. It stimulated Golden 2's power to become stronger. The power of golden flames is fusing very well. Fat Cat nodded with a smile and said, "In a few months this little thing's strength will be even more terrifying than yours." This. Nye Tian was stunned. He couldn't help but suck in a breath of cold air. If Golden 2's growth speed was really this fast, it would be too terrifying. Nye Tian, let's leave this place first. Fat Cat didn't say too much. Its figure moved and returned to the soul space with Golden 2, preparing to leave this place. Nye Tian nodded. The flames around him had already disappeared. There was only a void. Nye Tian's figure flickered and arrived at the edge of this void. An almost transparent barrier appeared in front of him. This barrier was the spatial barrier left behind by the golden flame seal. It wasn't very strong. Nye Tian's figure moved slightly. A sword intent surged out of his body and directly broke the spatial barrier. He then stepped out and left the sealed space. He took a step forward and appeared in midair. Nye Tian. The moment Nye Tian's figure appeared, a few screams sounded. Everyone's eyes were fixed on Nye Tian. They were extremely surprised. Nye Tian's figure stood in the air. He looked down at the crowd and smiled faintly. "Are you all surprised to see me?" His gaze swept across the crowd. Seeing that Chen Wuqing and the others were all fine, he immediately felt relieved. Chapter 1600. Nie Tian's gaze locked onto Wang Xianwei, not concealing the killing intent all over his body as he said solemnly, "Elder Wang Xianwei, you indeed have good means." It was precisely Wang Xianwei who pushed Nie Tian out at the last moment, forcing him to enter the door of golden flames with his fleshy body. If not for a Lai Yin Jufeng sealed inside the door of golden flames, Nie Tian would probably have perished already. Nie Tian, you actually didn't die. Wang Xianwei looked at Nie Tian, who suddenly appeared in midair, his expression turning stiff, his eyes revealing unconcealable terror. He never thought that Nie Tian actually did not die and actually appeared perfectly unscathed. All of this was too bizarre, far exceeding Wang Xianwei's expectations. "Big brother Nie Tian, you're still alive," Yun Tian also reacted at this time. Seeing that Nie Tian was really alive, he could not help crying tears of joy. Back then, Nie Tian was a step slower in order to save him. He was very guilty in his heart. Seeing that Nie Tian did not die at this moment, he was naturally happy. Chen Wuqing and the rest were also very happy to see Nie Tian again. "He's really lucky, not dying even after this." Luo Zian stood on the ground, a pair of cold eyes looking at Nie Tian as she said sinisterly in her heart. Everything that Wang Xianwei did, everyone knew. But apart from Chen Wuqing and the rest, the others were all very happy. Nie Tian being alive was a huge threat to them. But who could have thought that Nie Tian actually did not die, and even recovered his strength? One had to know, when everyone left back then, Nie Tian was already exhausted, almost reaching his body's limit. Just a short while later, he actually recovered completely. This was also too strange. "Yun Tian, what are you doing?" At this time, Nie Tian discovered that Yun Tian was holding the Battle Cloud Divine Garment in his hands and could not help frowning. He immediately reacted, sweeping a cold gaze across everyone and said coldly, "Yun Tian and I spared no lives to let you pass through the door of flame and picked up a life. I didn't expect that not only do you not know how to be grateful, you even want to repay kindness with enmity, wanting to snatch Yun Tian's Battle Cloud Divine Robe. Is this how you repay us?" It was obvious that Yun Tian wanted to hand over the Battle Cloud Divine Robe. As for who to hand it over to, it was self-evident. Of course, it was Lai Yu, Jian Huia Qi Yefeng, and the others. Nie Tian, the Battle Cloud Divine Robe is an ancient divine artifact. It's a waste to leave it in this brat's hands. We want the Battle Cloud Divine Robe. What's wrong with that? Jian Huia sneered and said with a mocking expression. Although Nie Tian is still alive, Jian Huia doesn't care about him. Shameless! Nie Tianling scolded. He landed beside Yun Tian and said in a cold tone, "If you have the guts, you can take a step forward and give it a try." As his deep voice faded, Nie Tian released a violent aura from his body. A soaring sword aura was released, filled with extreme sharpness. Nie Tian looked around. They had arrived at a great hall. The restrictive force here was even stronger than before. If they were to fight, he might not necessarily lose to Jian Huia and the others. The restrictive barrier here had an enormous suppressive force on experts above high god rank. Even a peak over god like Lai Yu would most likely only possess the strength of a late-stage high god. "Brat, do you think that you can fight with us just because there are restrictive forces here that suppress our strength?" Jian Huia sneered. His eyes were filled with cold, killing intent. He growled, "What a joke!" As the violent growl faded, Jian Huia's body trembled. A sharp sword aura pounced out and pressed towards Nie Tian. Boom! In the void, the two sword auras collided. With a loud sound, the sword aura around Nie Tian collapsed. He couldn't help but take a few steps back and spurt out a mouthful of blood. "Can't even withstand a single blow," Jian Huia sneered after pushing back Nie Tian. He was extremely arrogant. Nie Tian's eyes were cold and his face was terrifyingly gloomy. Although Jian Huia's strength was suppressed, his sword principal realm was still there. His sword essence realm was 2 levels higher than Yetion's sword vein realm. The power of his sword was far stronger than Yetion's. Perhaps even Lai Yu was not Jian Wuya's opponent. Brother Yetion, forget it. I'll just hand the battle cloud divine garment to him. Yun Tian saw that Yetion was injured. He quickly stepped forward and was about to hand over the battle cloud divine garment. Hand over the battle cloud divine garment. That's the smart thing to do, Jian Wuya laughed disdainfully. Yun Tian, step back. At this moment, Nye Tian stepped forward and stopped Yun Tian. Then, he stared at Jian Wuya gloomily and said, Jian Wuya, I'm warning you again. The battle cloud divine garment belongs to Yun Tian. It doesn't belong to you. Jian Wuya was stunned. He felt the firmness in Nye Tian's eyes. Then, his eyes darkened and he roared, Get lost! Boom! Before Jian Wuya roared, he swung his sword. A violent sword intent bloomed in the sky and turned into a mighty sword shadow, pressing towards Nye Tian. Jian Wuya didn't hold back much in this attack. Even if he had to kill Nye Tian, he had to get the battle cloud divine garment. Be careful! Yang Zhongqiu and the others couldn't help but scream when they saw this scene. Jian Wuya's sword principal realm was too strong. It wasn't something that Nye Tian could contend with. Facing Jian Wuya's fatal sword attack, Nye Tian's eyes didn't show fear. Instead, he showed a strong fighting spirit. Boom! In the blink of an eye, terrifying black runes suddenly surged out of his body, faintly condensing into the shape of a dragon around him. His aura suddenly skyrocketed, and waves of violent dragon energy were released, wreaking havoc in the space. Boom! In the next moment, the huge sword shadow fell on Nye Tian's body. However, it was blocked by the incomparably fierce dragon energy. Then, a giant golden dragon appeared, and a mighty thunder intent spread out. The entire hall began to tremble. Upon closer inspection, there were strange black runes surging on the body of the giant golden dragon. It constantly stimulated the dragon energy to surge. Roar! The giant dragon appeared and roared. The dragon's roar was like thunder in the 9 heavens, resounding in the hall. Suddenly, a terrible dragon energy spread out and pressed towards Jian Wuya like a raging wave. Jian Wuya was stunned, but his reaction was very fast. He stabbed out with his sword and forcibly broke the dragon energy. At the same time, he retreated and stood in the air. Everyone was stunned by the sudden scene in front of them, and they looked at the crimson golden dragon in shock. What a terrifying kid! Lai Yu frowned and his face became gloomy. He didn't expect that Nye Tian could still burst out such a terrible power. Jian Wuya was very strong at the moment. Even Lai Yu was afraid of him. Nye Tian dared to fight Jian Wuya head-on. This courage alone was very terrifying. Nye Tian, you have become stronger again. Luo Xian's pretty face was gloomy. She didn't feel good. She didn't expect that the person she betrayed back then could grow to this stage. Qi Yifeng stood in the distance and stared at Nye Tian with an extremely strange expression. He could feel that the dragon energy around Nye Tian was very powerful and strange. It was releasing an evil aura. How is this possible? Jian Wuya, who was standing in the air, suddenly realized that Nye Tian's strength had soared to the peak of the mid-god stage. He couldn't help but exclaim, Brat, did you take the explosive yuan pill? Nye Tian's strength was originally at the mid-stage mid-god stage. Suddenly, he became a peak mid-god stage mid-god. Only a divine pill like the explosive yuan pill could do that. Jian Wuya, your time has come. Nye Tian didn't answer Jian Wuya. Instead, he stared at the ladder and said eerily. Chapter 1601. Nye Tian activated the Dragon Mark Talisman and his strength soared to the peak of the mid-god level. His whole body was surging with boundless dragon energy. His eyes were cold and filled with killing intent. Although Fat Cat had reminded him that the Dragon Mark Talisman couldn't be used casually, He couldn't care less at this moment. Jian Wuya was too arrogant. Nie Tian had already decided to kill him. If he couldn't kill Jian Wuya, he wouldn't be able to protect Yun Tian's battle cloud divine garment. You're just an ant. You want to kill me? Dream on. Jian Wuya calmed down. His eyes were like swords, sharp and cold. Even if Nie Tian's strength rose to the peak of the mid-god level, he still wasn't afraid. Although he was suppressed by the power of the restriction, his sword principle realm was at the sword essence realm. Even if his strength was suppressed to the mid-god level, he could still kill a high god expert. Everyone retreated and didn't dare to get close to Nie Tian and Jian Wuya. Everyone knew that it would be a life-and-death battle between the two. Nie Tian, I will let you experience the terror of a swordsman with the sword essence. Jian Wuya said Nie Tian coldly. His eyes were surging with intense killing intent. At this moment, he didn't have much fear of Yang Zhongqiu. Although Yang Zhongqiu's identity as an elder of the Holy Assembly was real, he definitely didn't have any experts protecting him. Otherwise, those hidden experts would have appeared in such a critical situation. Even if Yang Zhongqiu and Nie Tian had an extraordinary relationship, it couldn't change the fate of Nie Tian's death. Nie Tian's figure stood in the sky above the main hall. His eyes didn't reveal fear, but terrifying battle intent. This kid is so scary. Facing an opponent who is far superior to him, he isn't afraid at all. Instead, he can display such terrifying battle intent. This temperament isn't something an ordinary person can have, Lai Yu said to himself while looking at Nie Tian. His eyes were filled with fear. In fact, he was very happy to see Nie Tian and Jian Wuya fight to the death. Jian Wuya was Lai Yu's strongest opponent because of his terrifying sword Dao strength. Lai Yu knew that if they encountered any good items, he and Jian Wuya would inevitably have to fight. Therefore, it was not bad to let Nie Tian test Jian Wuya's strength first. Although he could see that Nie Tian had a strong fighting spirit, Lai Yu did not think that Nie Tian had the ability to fight with Jian Wuya. In a battle of life and death, the decisive factor in the outcome was strength, not combat prowess. No matter how strong Nie Tian's battle intent was, without strength, only death awaited him. Little bastard, I'll take your life with this sword. Jian Wuya sneered. His eyes were extremely cold. After that, he suddenly moved. His silhouette was like a sword, releasing a powerful sword intent. The entire hall was filled with killing intent. This was the terror of a swordsman with the essence of the sword. The sword intent and sword soul had already fused into the veins and bone marrow, and the entire person was about to become a sharp sword. He was simply a human-shaped murder weapon. Boom! With a thrust of the sword's shadow was like a mountain or the sea. The vast and powerful sword intent pressed over crazily, like an endless raging wave. Everyone felt the pressure of the sword intent and couldn't help but retreat again. Jian Wuya clearly wanted to use Nie Tian to establish his might. He wanted to kill Nie Tian in one move and use this to deter Lai Yu and the others. He wanted to let them understand that he, Jian Wuya, was the strongest person here. Facing Jian Wuya's killing move, Nie Tian's eyes were as gloomy as water. After that, he stomped his feet and the huge body of the golden scarlet dragon rolled out. He actually wanted to confront Jian Wuya head-on. Nie Tian, you're still young. When Qi Yifeng saw this scene, his eyes couldn't help but tremble. His heart cold, he said, although your sovereign dragon vein is strong, how can it withstand the sharpness of Jian Wuya's sword? Fighting with him now is simply courting death. Qi Yifeng thought that even if it was him, he would have to think twice if he wanted to take Jian Wuya's sword head-on. Nie Tian's recklessness was really courting death. However, at this moment, Nie Tian didn't care. The huge dragon under his feet rolled out. The surging power of lightning and the incomparably strange dragon mark talisman wreaked havoc in the air and rushed towards Jian Wuya. Courting death. When Jian Wuya saw Nie Tian's action, he couldn't help but sneer. He seemed to have already seen the miserable scene of Nie Tian being killed by his sword. At this moment, everyone held their breath. Their hearts were in their throat. They didn't even blink, they didn't want to miss the most exciting scene. Rumble! In the next moment, the sword's shadow and the huge dragon collided in the air. The two terrifying forces exploded into endless waves of air. The void shook violently, it seemed like the entire hall was about to collapse. Chi. Endless violent forces tore through the air, emitting ear-piercing roars. In the void, Nie Tian and Jian Wuya's figures could no longer be seen. There was only dragon chi and sword intent surging non-stop. How could this be? Lai Yu's eyes were burning. He seemed to have discovered something wrong. His face darkened and he exclaimed. He suddenly sensed that Nie Tian's aura was still there. Moreover, it was still rising crazily. It was extremely terrifying. This is impossible. Qi Yifeng also discovered something was wrong at the same time. He let out a strange cry. His voice was extremely ear-piercing. They had never expected that Nie Tian would actually be able to withstand Jian Wuya's all-out attack, and that his aura was still soaring. After a long time, the violent waves of air in the air dispersed. Two figures appeared in the air. They were Nie Tian and Jian Wuya. At this moment, both of them were injured. However, their auras were already stable. Their auras were still very terrifying. Not dead. When the others saw this scene, they couldn't help but let out a strange cry. They looked at the two figures in the sky in disbelief. No one expected that Nie Tian would not die in a head-on confrontation with Jian Wuya. Moreover, Jian Wuya was injured. Jian Wuya's figure stood in the air like a mountain. His eyes were surging with murderous intent. At the same time, there was also disbelief and astonishment. He never expected that his all-out attack would be blocked by Nie Tian. Nie Tian's battle strength had far exceeded his expectations. At this moment, Nie Tian's face was gloomy. There was a trace of blood at the corner of his mouth. In order to receive Jian Wuya's attack, he used the Dragon Mark Talisman. At the same time, he also used the Fiend God power of the Fiend God Origin Embryo. The Fiend God power had a certain stimulating effect on the Dragon Mark Talisman. This caused Nie Tian's strength to soar once again. He had actually reached the early stage High God realm. However, his martial body wasn't that of an early stage High God. Therefore, he was suffering tremendous pain at all times, making him look rather hideous. Nie Tian, your strength has amazed me. Jian Wuya's eyes trembled. He said in a cold voice, however, this is as far as you can go. Nie Tian had used the Sovereign Dragon Vein and the Dragon Mark Talisman in that attack. How was he going to fight Jian Wuya next? Is that so? Nie Tianling laughed. The corners of his mouth rose into a strange smile. He looked extremely evil and even somewhat contemptuous. It was as if he was already confident of victory. Chapter 1602. Jian Wuya was in the air and his expression suddenly changed. He was terrified and his body trembled. He almost couldn't stand still. What's going on? The sudden change caused everyone to be stunned. They all looked at Jian Wuya in confusion. They didn't know what had happened to Jian Wuya. Did you think that I would do nothing in that head-on clash? Nie Tianling smiled coldly. The coldness in his eyes became even more obvious. He knew that he would be at a disadvantage, but he still chose to take it head-on. There was a reason for that. The moment the sword shadow and the dragon collided, a part of the Dragon Mark Talisman in Nie Tian's body entered Jian Wuya's body. The Dragon Mark Talisman's corrosive power was very strong. Jian Wuya was overconfident and never thought about defending himself. That was why Nie Tian took advantage of it. Back when Yun Heilong fought with Nie Tian, he had inserted the Dragon Mark Talisman into Nie Tian's body. Who would have thought that Nie Tian would absorb it? But Jian Wuya didn't have a Sovereign Dragon Vein in his body, so he couldn't absorb the Dragon Mark Talisman. He could only be devoured by the Dragon Mark Talisman. At that moment, Jian Wuya's strength was rapidly weakening. His yuan meridians were slowly being devoured and his body was enduring great pain. "Nie Tian, that's a ruthless move." At this time, Little Fat Cat let out a strange laugh. It had just realized that Nie Tian had such a sinister plan. Arg! At that moment, Jian Wuya finally couldn't withstand the dragon mark talisman's corrosion. He let out a miserable howl and his whole body became ferocious. Black energy began to flow out of his body. It was extremely strange. What's wrong with Jian Wuya? When everyone saw this, they couldn't help but frown. They were confused. Even now, they still didn't know what was happening to Jian Wuya. "Brat, I'll kill you." Jian Wuya suddenly went crazy and forcefully circulated his yuan meridians. Even if he died, he wanted to die together with Nie Tian. Boom! Jian Wuya's body shook and he released his sword intent. At the same time, a huge amount of blood qi filled the air. He was going to fight to the death. Nie Tian frowned slightly. He didn't expect Jian Wuya to be so brave. "Little bastard, die for me!" Jian Wuya roared and all the blood in his body surged. A screen of blood appeared in the air. It was extremely bloody. Swoosh, swoosh, swoosh. His body trembled, and countless blood-colored sword shadows burst out from his body, shooting in all directions. The sky was filled with sword shadows. This was Jian Wuya's final move. "This person is so fierce." Nie Tian furrowed his brows, after which the astral soul armor enveloped his entire body, blocking the attacks of the countless sword shadows. Jian Wuya was extremely terrifying. Before he died, he couldn't help but want to kill Nie Tian and the others as well. Unfortunately, his strength had been greatly eroded. He was no longer a threat to the others. Since Nie Tian was the closest to Jian Wuya, he bore the brunt of the attacks. Even though the star soul armor shielded him from most of the attacks, a few sword shadows still managed to hit him, leaving a few bloody wounds on his body. Nie Tian. At the last moment, Jian Wuya roared angrily. His eyes were filled with extreme unwillingness. However, his blood qi and sword intent had already been exhausted. His body could no longer bear the pressure of the dragon mark talisman. He directly exploded and turned into a bloody light. Jian Wuya, one of the masters of the 12 celestial palaces, an overgod, a swordsman with the essence of the sword, had died. Nie Tian took a few steps back. There were a few wounds on his body that were bleeding. He was covered in blood and his face was frighteningly pale. After killing Jian Wuya, he had almost used up all his energy. This battle was extremely dangerous. If Jian Wuya had been more careful and didn't let the dragon mark talisman invade his body, the result of this battle would have been unpredictable. Jian Wuya is dead. The crowd stared at the scene in the sky. They were stunned for more than 10 seconds before they finally reacted. The shock in their hearts was written on their faces. Nie Tian, a mid-god, had actually killed an overgod. Moreover, it was an overgod with the essence of the sword. This was too unbelievable. If they had not seen it with their own eyes, they would not have believed it at all. At this moment, the dragon mark talisman around Nie Tian began to disappear. His aura immediately dispersed and his strength returned to the early mid-god level. When the dragon mark talisman was activated, his strength would temporarily increase. This was very similar to the Yuan explosion pill. However, what was even better than the Yuan explosion pill was that after the dragon mark talisman was activated, Nie Tian would not be in a weakened state. However, the dragon mark talisman would not be able to be used for a period of time. Seeing the black talisman around Nie Tian disappear, everyone's eyes trembled once again. Their gazes became strange. They could not understand just what power was hidden within Nie Tian for it to be so strange. At this moment, the expressions of Lai Yu and Qi Yefeng were extremely ugly, as if they were still unable to accept what had just happened. With the existence of the restriction, Jian Wuya was a cultivator even more powerful than them. If even Jian Wuya had died to Nie Tian, did that not mean that they would have suffered the same fate if they had fought against Nie Tian earlier? Nie Tian must die. At the same time, Lai Yu and Qi Yefeng bellowed out in their hearts. A sliver of killing intent flashed through their eyes as their faces became so gloomy that blood seemed to drip from them. Nie Tian's terror had exceeded their imaginations. If he was allowed to continue growing, he would definitely become a heaven-defying existence. Lai Yu and Qi Yefeng made up their minds at the same time. Once they left the 9 Dragons' earth vein and the ancient restriction disappeared, they would kill Nie Tian. Without the ancient restriction, the strength of the 2 palace masters would recover to the level of an overgod. This was not a strength that Nie Tian could resist. Nie Tian saw Lai Yu and Qi Yefeng's reactions, but he sneered in his heart. He said, "Lai Yu, Qi Yefeng, do you think you still have a chance to leave here?" The existence of the ancient restriction gave Nie Tian the ability to fight against overgod experts. He would not give up such a good opportunity. Once his strength recovered slightly, he would kill Lai Yu and Qi Yefeng as soon as he had the chance. This world was just so cruel. Once they were on opposite sides, it was either you die or I die. Just like when Nie Tian broke open the door of fire, Lai Yu and Qi Yefeng did not think about his life or death. Qi Yefeng even wanted to kill him. On the other side, Luo Xian's stiff expression finally showed a trace of reaction. Her delicate face, however, was extremely unsightly. She looked at Nie Tian with trembling eyes, and no one knew what she was thinking. Nie Tian, the person she had abandoned, killed, and then came back to life, had actually grown to this point. This was a little hard for her to accept. At this moment, Luo Xian was even a little shaken. She doubted whether it was a wise move to kill Nie Tian back then. She even imagined how strong Nie Tian would be now if he did not die back then. But there were no ifs in this world. Things had already happened, so it was irreversible. Luo Xian stood on the opposite side of Nie Tian, so she must always be on the opposite side. Nie Tian, when I become Tower Master Qianyu, it will be the time of your death. Luo Xian stared at Nie Tian with a pair of cold and murderous eyes, and said coldly in her heart. Nie Tian felt Luo Xian's killing intent, but he did not take it to heart. At this moment, Luo Xian was not a threat to him. Chapter 1603. Boom! All of a sudden, a figure appeared in midair, and made a move towards Nie Tian. A powerful palm strike descended, rumbling and roaring. "Watch out, Nie Tian!" Chen Wuqing and the others were taken aback by the sudden change, and then they cried out in alarm. Nie Tian's pupils shrank slightly. He reacted quickly and retreated several hundred meters, dodging the deadly palm strike head-on. However, he was still affected by the aftershock, and was sent flying backward, smashing heavily into a huge stone pillar in the hall. Pfft! Nie Tian was already injured. Coupled with the strong impact, his body trembled and he spurted a mouthful of blood. However, he immediately steadied his body and looked at the person who attacked him. He said coldly, "Wang Xianwei, it's you." The person who attacked Nie Tian was none other than Wang Xianwei, the inner elder of Shattering Cloud Divine Palace. Nie Tian's attention was focused on Lai Yu and Luo Xian. He didn't pay attention to Wang Xianwei at all. That was why the latter's sneak attack succeeded. "Yes, it's me." Wang Xianwei's eyes were gloomy and fierce. He couldn't wait to tear Nie Tian into pieces and turn his bones into ashes. Nie Tian killed his nephew, Wang Lang. How could he not hate him? Although Wang Lang and Wang Xianwei were uncle and nephew, Wang Lang's father died early and Wang Lang was raised by Wang Xianwei. "Wang Xianwei, I didn't want to kill you. However, you tried to kill me again and again. You can't blame me for this." Nie Tian's body sank and he shook off the blood stains on his body. His eyes were surging with terrifying killing intent. Wang Xianwei almost killed Nie Tian just now and now he launched a sneak attack again. "How shameless! Nie Tian, you killed my nephew. I won't let you live." Wang Xianwei said coldly and looked at Lai Yu. The latter didn't react at all. Lai Yu's lack of reaction proved that he agreed with Wang Xianwei. Palace Master Lai Yun, what is the meaning of this? Yang Zhongqiu could not help but let out a furious roar. Elder Yang, this is the personal enmity between Nie Tian and Wang Xianwei, and this palace master has no right to interfere. Lai Yu smiled lightly as he spoke in a peculiar tone. What a personal grudge. Looks like the people of Cloud-Shattering Divine Palace are all shameless. Nie Tian swept a glance at Lai Yu and sneered in an extremely disdainful manner. Palace Master Lai Yun, do you really think that a puny little Wang Xianwei can kill me? Clearly, Lai Yu was happy to see Wang Xianwei make a move. Nie Tian's injuries were not light. No matter what, Wang Xianwei was still a Lord-level expert. She might really be able to kill Nie Tian. However, the aura that Nie Tian was displaying right now showed that he didn't care about Wang Xianwei at all. Arrogant! Looking at the look of disdain on Nie Tian's face, Wang Xianwei roared in rage. His silhouette flickered as he attacked once more. A boundless amount of palm energy gushed forth, exuding a terrifying aura. I'll take your life with this sword. Nie Tian stood in the air as he glanced at Wang Xianwei coldly. After that, he roared and the heavenly slash of the Sword of Absolute Slash appeared. His entire body's sword intent surged and surged in the air, condensing into a deadly sword shadow that surged forth. After the battle with Jianhuia, Nie Tian's understanding of the way of the sword had increased slightly, and his sword intent had become even more terrifying. Boom! In an instant, the sword chi was like a mountain, and the sword intent was like a sea. The mighty sword shadow surged out crazily, rushing towards Wang Xianwei. Boom! In the air, two extremely powerful forces collided, causing the void to tremble. The vigorous palm energy was completely defeated and collapsed. The terrifying sword shadow surged forward. Ah! Wang Xianwei sensed that something was wrong. He let out a miserable howl, but it was already too late. At this moment, his eyes were filled with great fear and disbelief. He was an over-god expert, but he couldn't even block a single sword strike from a heavily injured mid-god expert. In the air, the sword shadow whizzed past. Wang Xianwei's body was directly annihilated by the boundless sword intent, leaving only a godhead floating in the air. The inner elder of the cloud-shattering divine palace, a mighty over-god expert, was killed by Nie Tian with a single sword strike. The crowd looked at the scene in the air with trembling eyes. They were so shocked that they couldn't speak. Nie Tian had actually killed two overgods in a row. Such strength was really shocking. The crowd couldn't imagine how Nie Tian did it. Wang Xianwei was indeed an overgod expert. However, under the pressure of the restriction, his strength was at most that of an early-stage high god. Nie Tian, on the other hand, was completely unaffected by the restriction. Therefore, to him, he had only killed an early-stage high god. It should be known that Nie Tian had once killed a pinnacle high god expert. Moreover, Nie Tian's comprehension of the sword principle had improved, so his combat strength had increased a little. Therefore, he could kill Wang Xianwei with a single sword strike. However, this sword strike had consumed a lot of his strength. Lai Yu, Qi Yefeng, do you still want to try? Nie Tian was very domineering at this moment. He glanced coldly at Lai Yu and Qi Yefeng and shouted loudly. Lai Yu and Qi Yefeng's eyes tensed up. They actually revealed timidity at the same time. They were obviously avoiding eye contact with Nie Tian. The two palace lords, peak experts that could shock the entire divine realms, actually dared not respond to Nie Tian's provocation. If this scene were to spread, everyone would probably laugh their heads off. Is this your courage? Nie Tian Tianling smiled disdainfully. He was extremely domineering. That kind of provocation could make people go crazy. Even a middle god martial artist was afraid. Lai Yu and Qi Yefeng were really disgracing themselves. However, they had witnessed Nie Tian's strength with their own eyes. They were really afraid in their hearts. Losing face was better than losing their lives. Lai Yu and Qi Yefeng were not swordsmen. Under the situation where their strength was suppressed, they were not much stronger than Wang Xianwei. They really did not have the confidence to fight with Nie Tian. More importantly, there was still Yao Chen by Nie Tian's side. Yao Chen's enchantment was also very strange. It could even further suppress Lai Yu and Qi Yefeng's strength. Nie Tian's gaze swept across Lai Yu and Qi Yefeng. His figure slowly descended. He was so domineering in order to deter Lai Yu and Qi Yefeng, not letting the two have other ideas. Yun Tian, put away the battle cloud divine robe. Nie Tian came to Yun Tian's side and said lightly. His pale face barely revealed a smile. Yun Tian nodded heavily and put away the battle cloud divine robe. Yang Zhongqiu passed a divine elixir to Nie Tian. The latter consumed it directly and his complexion turned slightly better. It was only now that Nie Tian had the time to properly observe the surrounding environment. They seemed to have come to a huge palace. At this moment they were in a large hall. The surroundings were spacious and lonely, looking very desolate. Fat, this is the underground palace you were talking about, right? Nie Tian frowned slightly and asked. Yes. Fat Cat nodded and looked at a passageway in front. Let's enter that passageway to take a look first. Okay. Nie Tian nodded solemnly and was the first to walk over. The others followed after him. Lai Yu, Qi Yefeng and the rest could only follow behind Nie Tian obediently. After a moment, everyone came to an even wider hall. At the end of the hall, rays of white halos were released. The air was instantly filled with the strong aura of Mother Earth essence energy. Chapter 1604. Is there something strange? Nie Tian looked at the place where the white halo flowed and frowned. He felt that the Mother Earth origin energy there was denser than the outside world. We'll know once we go over and take a look. Fat Cat chuckled, unable to conceal his excitement. Nie Tian looked at the people around him and walked towards the end of the hall. The others also noticed that something was amiss and followed after him. After a while, they came to the end of the hall and felt that the Mother Earth origin energy in the space was extremely dense, almost to the point of being in liquid form. They couldn't feel any pressure at all, but it gave them a very comfortable feeling. Nie Tian walked over and felt that there seemed to be a formless space-time barrier in front of him. He frowned and became much more cautious. He took a few more steps forward and a formless space-time pressure came at him, making him unable to go any closer. He raised his head and saw a strange space in front of him. It was as if this space was isolated from the outside world and existed independently. At the center of that space, a sparkling and translucent ball of light surged, releasing waves of mysterious energy that surged through the entire space, forming a magnificent scene. What is that? The others also noticed the crystalline sphere and couldn't help but cry out in confusion. Nie Tian's eyes shone and trembled nonstop. He could feel that the ball of crystal light contained extremely terrifying energy. That energy was like the sea, vast and boundless, giving off a feeling that it was endless. 9 dragons' earth veins. Could that ball of crystal light be the source of the earth veins? In the next moment, Nie Tian's eyes trembled slightly and he cried out in his heart. His eyes shone with a blazing light. Fat Cat said before that the purpose of entering the 9 dragons' earth veins was to find the source of the earth veins. Could the white ball of light in front of him be the source of the earth veins? Nie Tian, this is the source of the earth veins. After a while, Fat Cat's voice finally rang out. He opened his mouth and his body was trembling slightly. The source of the earth veins. Nie Tian's heart shook and he asked in shock, what exactly is this thing? It actually contains such enormous power. Nie Tian didn't know much about the earthen vein of the 9 dragons and the earthen vein's source, but he could sense that the earthen vein's source contained a tremendous amount of power. The Fat Cat's blue eyes flickered as she replied in a trembling voice, the earth vein's source is the essence of earth. Origin power? Nye Tian was taken aback once again, and his expression stiffened. He had heard of the power of origin a few times, and he knew that it was a power that was of a higher level than the bright spirit power, a power that could create a new world. In the world of martial artists, the 9 major elements were known as metal, wood, water, fire, earth, wind, lightning, light, and darkness. These 9 elements were known as the 9 elements of heaven and earth. Each of the 9 elements had its own corresponding source energy, and the source of the earth vein belonged to the source energy of the earth. Of course, the source of the earth veins was not all of the earth source energy, but a part of the system's source energy. Nye Tian, the earth source energy, is also known as the veins of the earth. The source of the earth vein that you see before you is a part of the veins of the earth. Fat Cat calmed down a little, and spoke in a low voice, but his eyes were still trembling. The origin energy corresponding to the 9 primordial essences were known as the 9 great essences. It was rumored that the Creator had used the 9 great essences to create the current world. The small 9 great sources were able to give rise to a vast and boundless universe, and one could only imagine the power contained in them. The ball of light in front of Nye Tian and the others was a part of the 9 great sources, the veins of the earth. Although the source of the earth vein was only a part of the veins of the earth, the power hidden within it was immeasurable. Otherwise, Fat Cat wouldn't have been so excited when he saw the source of the earth vein. Nye Tian forced himself to calm down and asked in a low voice, "Could it be that the 9-dragon earth vein that we saw on the map is derived from the source of the earth vein?" "Yes." Fat Cat nodded heavily. "I don't know why the source of the earth vein is here, but I can confirm that the 9-dragon earth vein is derived from the source of the earth vein." "How terrifying!" Nye Tian couldn't help but gasp when he heard Fat Cat's words, and cold sweat appeared on his forehead. He had seen the 9-dragon earth vein on the map before, and it was a super-large earth vein that stretched across the entire earthly domain. The power contained in the 9-dragon earth vein was immeasurable. The entire 9-dragon earth vein was derived from the source of the earth vein. One could imagine how terrifying the source of the earth vein was. A thought occurred to Nye Tian, and he couldn't help but frown as he asked, "Little Fei, we came here to find the earthstring source. Now that we've found it, are we really going to take it with us?" "Of course." Fat Cat chuckled. "We've finally found the source of the earth vein after so many trials and tribulations. Of course we have to take it away." Fat Cat had already planned to not only take away the source of the earth vein, but also let Nye Tian try to fuse with it. Nye Tian had condensed demonic yuan in his body, and it had the power to fuse with the source of the earth vein. However, Nye Tian's current strength was too weak, and the demonic yuan might not be able to withstand the power of the earth vein's source. "Fat, you're not joking, are you?" Nye Tian was stunned, and his eyes flickered. "If I take away the source of the earth vein, will the 9-dragon earth vein be destroyed? Will the earthly domain be destroyed?" At this moment, Nye Tian was worried that the 9-dragon earth veins would be destroyed if he took the earth vein source with him. He had seen the 9-dragon earth vein before, and it stretched across the entire earthly domain. If the 9-dragon earth vein was destroyed, the entire earthly domain would collapse. Although the earth vein's source was a good thing, Nye Tian didn't want to destroy an entire domain for his own selfish desires, because that would cause countless lives to be lost. In fact, Nye Tian only wanted to enter the 9-dragon earth vein to absorb some of its energy to improve his strength. He didn't think too much about other things. "Nye Tian, you're thinking too much." Fat Cat could guess what Nye Tian was worried about, and frowned. The earth vein's source gives birth to the 9-dragon earth vein. Even if the earth vein's source disappears, the 9-dragon earth vein won't collapse. The energy within the earth vein will slowly weaken, and after a few 100,000 years, it will gradually disappear. This won't have any effect on the earthly domain. "That's good." Nye Tian let out a long breath, and his heart relaxed. "Nye Tian, it won't be easy to take away the earth vein's source. The people around you are also interested in the earth vein's source. Fat Cat suddenly laughed, and reminded Nye Tian to pay attention to the others. Nye Tian's eyes narrowed slightly, and his brows furrowed as his gaze swept across Lai Yu and the others. With his current strength, he wasn't afraid of Lai Yu and the others. However, when his gaze landed on Qi Yefeng, his expression changed, and he suddenly became terrified. Chapter 1605. The dragon vein seal in Qi Yefeng's body has been broken. Nye Tian suddenly sensed this. His eyes narrowed and he almost cried out. At this moment, he also sensed that Qi Yefeng's strength had risen from mid-overgod to peak overgod unknowingly. There were even signs of him breaking through to overgod. It really is the dragon vein. Nye Tian also sensed that Qi Yefeng's 9 yuan meridians were in the shape of dragons. They were innate dragon veins. Lord Nye Tian, are you all right? Yang Zhongqiu sensed that Nye Tian's expression was strange, and could not help but ask. Nye Tian shook his head slightly. He wanted to hide it, but he discovered that Qi Yefeng had already fixed his gaze on him. Qi Yefeng's eyes were gloomy and he had a strange smile on his face. Nye Tian, you already know what's in front of us, right? Qi Yefeng suddenly smiled and said with a deep voice. His smile was extremely evil. Scarlet Moon Palace Master, do you know what that ball of light is? Lai Yu still did not know anything. He was stunned and asked, the power contained in this ball of light is extremely terrifying. I've never seen anything like it in my life. What is it? Lai Yu was not a perception-type cultivator, but he could sense that the power contained in the Terra Source was extremely great. It was far stronger than the Earth Dragon's heart. He was very confused about what it was. Lai Yu, do you want to know what it is? Qi Yefeng glanced at Lai Yu and suddenly laughed. He said with disdain, it's a pity that you're not qualified to know with your strength. Lai Yu's eyes narrowed slightly. He sensed that Qi Yefeng's attitude and tone had suddenly changed. It was as if he had become a different person in an instant. He could not help but feel doubtful. He then said, Qi Yefeng, are you provoking me? Provoking you? Qi Yefeng sneered. His eyes became even more disdainful. He said coldly, do you think you're worthy of my provocation? Lai Yu frowned. He could no longer tolerate it. Killing intent appeared in his eyes as he said furiously, Qi Yefeng, you're looking to die. As soon as the word die was uttered, a rumbling voice resounded, and even the space-time barrier trembled. Lai Yu didn't have a good impression of Qi Yefeng in the first place, but he didn't want to shed all pretense of cordiality with the latter at this time. However, the other party had provoked him again, and if he were to continue tolerating it, others would think that he, Lai Yu, was a pushover. Lai Yu was very puzzled. Why did Qi Yefeng's attitude suddenly change? It was as if he had become another person. Lai Yu, the one courting death is you. Qi Yefeng's body trembled and he remained unmoving like a mountain. Only his pair of eyes stared at Lai Yu like a venomous wolf. When Nye Tian saw that Qi Yefeng and Lai Yu were inexplicably about to start a fight, he couldn't help but frown and immediately signaled everyone to retreat. The battle between the two palace masters was on the verge of breaking out. Everyone else avoided them, not daring to get close. Qi Yefeng's sudden change in attitude made everyone confused, not knowing what was going on. The light in Lai Yu's eyes flickered before he immediately sensed something. His face could not help but change, and he cried out, Qi Yefeng, how did you suddenly become stronger? Only at this moment did Lai Yu discover that Qi Yefeng's strength had actually increased by 2 layers strangely. He had gone from a mid-overgod to a peak-overgod. This was just too strange. Lai Yu could not understand it at all. Lai Yu, you're too stupid. You don't need to know, Qi Yefeng smiled strangely. He did not take Lai Yu seriously at all. How arrogant! Lai Yu finally could not take it anymore after being looked down upon again. A pair of black profound wings appeared on his back. Profound feather chi permeated the air, radiating with an extremely dark presence. Lai Yu stared at Qi Yifeng coldly and sneered. Qi Yifeng, even if your strength has increased to peak over God, you're still the same as me. We're both suppressed by the power of the restriction. It's still uncertain who will emerge victorious. Really? The corner of Qi Yifeng's lips twitched, forming a strange arc. Afterwards, he smiled faintly and murmured, Qi Gui do it? Qi Gui. Nie Tian's eyes suddenly narrowed when he heard the name. He had almost forgotten that there was a Qi Gui beside Qi Yifeng. As soon as Qi Yifeng finished speaking indifferently, the space there suddenly shook and actually trembled strangely. Afterwards, a huge, blood-red blade appeared out of nowhere. The glow of the blade suddenly blossomed in the air, and a brutal force shot out. This is... Lai Yu cried out as he was caught off guard. He wanted to resist, but it was too late. Spurt! Wherever the sharp force passed by, a bloody head flew into the air. There was great shock on its face. Lai Yu had actually been beheaded by the scarlet blade. The eyes of the head in the air continued to flicker. There was shock, reluctance, and fear in them. Never in his wildest dreams did Lai Yu think that there would actually be someone hiding beside him. A mighty peak over God, the Lord of the cloud-shattering divine palace, had actually been beheaded in an ambush. The way he died had truly exceeded everyone's expectations. Boom! Just when everyone's gazes turned sluggish, the scarlet blade struck out once again, directly shattering Lai Yu's body into pieces. The scarlet blade flickered with a cold glow in the air, releasing an extremely bloody aura. A blurry figure hovered in the air, fusing with the space almost perfectly. No one could see his true appearance clearly. This again. Nie Tian was stunned. Afterwards, he reacted and cried out in his heart. Last time, Qi Yifeng had used the same method to kill the traitor of the Crimson Moon Divine Palace, Long Wei. Qi Gui had suddenly appeared and directly killed his opponent. Now, Qi Yifeng had used the same method to deal with Lai Yu. It was truly despicable. What? Looking at the bloody scene in the air, everyone took a deep breath in, and didn't know what was going on. Qi Yifeng glanced at Lai Yu's head and sneered. Such a stupid person wants to covet the source of the terra firma. What a joke. The source of the terra firma. Nie Tian could not help but frown when he heard Qi Yifeng say this name. Soon, he realized that Qi Yifeng already knew that the ball of light was the source of the terra firma. Nie Tian, are you surprised? At this moment, Qi Yifeng looked at Nie Tian and smiled faintly. Do you really think that my identity is as simple as the Lord of the Crimson Moon Palace? Nie Tian's eyes suddenly narrowed. He growled, Qi Yifeng, just who are you? He had actually suspected Qi Yifeng's identity a long time ago, but he was never sure. Now that Qi Yifeng had said it personally, how could he not be surprised? Nie Tian, your sovereign dragon vein is not your own. It's taken from someone else. Qi Yifeng said solemnly. He actually said directly, have you heard of the name Fated One? Qi Yifeng, you really are Fated One. Nie Tian frowned. His eyes trembled violently as he exclaimed. In fact, when he knew that Qi Yifeng had the innate dragon vein, he began to suspect that the latter was most likely Fated One. But this suspicion could not be confirmed. Now that Qi Yifeng had admitted it himself, there was no doubt. Chapter 1606. Qi Yifeng's face was extremely gloomy. His cold eyes swept across the crowd, emitting a cold, killing intent. Nie Tian knew of his identity as destiny, so he would never allow Nie Tian to live. Not only that, but everyone else would also die. Destiny! Nie Tian felt Qi Yifeng's killing intent, but he sneered. Qi Yifeng, you wanted the Mother Earth stone back then because of the 9 dragons ley vein, am I right? That's right. Qi Yifeng nodded slightly and laughed strangely. Nie Tian, you are indeed very smart. I still have to thank you for leading me to this place. Without you, I would not have been able to find the 9 dragons ley vein, much less the terra vein source. This is all thanks to you. Qi Yifeng wanted the Mother Earth stone back then because of the 9 dragons ley vein and the terra vein source. He also had a map of the Terra vein, but it was not activated. He never thought that Nye Tian would give him such a big surprise, bringing him directly to the Terra vein source. This was definitely a pleasant surprise for him. I am very curious. Why are you so desperate to get the Terra vein source? Nye Tian frowned slightly and asked in a deep voice. Are you trying to find out about the destined one from me? Qi Yifeng sneered and said, Do you think I'm that stupid? You are not. Nye Tian laughed and said, But you still told me that the search for the Earthstring essence has something to do with the destined one. Qi Yifeng's eyes suddenly darkened. He did not expect Nye Tian to be so cunning as to actually trick him. But he quickly calmed down, and the killing intent in his eyes became serious. He laughed coldly. Nye Tian, even if you have guessed something, it is useless, because you will definitely not leave here alive today. Nye Tian's intelligence exceeded Qi Yifeng's expectations. What Destiny planned was a top secret that must not be leaked. Therefore, no matter what, Qi Yifeng would not let Nye Tian live. Really? Nye Tian looked at Qi Yifeng without a trace of fear in his eyes. Instead, he faintly smiled and said, Qi Yifeng, do you think you can kill me? What do you think? Qi Yifeng was taken aback at first, then he sneered, his laughter extremely sinister. Although Nye Tian killed Jianwuya before and proved his strength, Qi Yifeng was still confident that he could kill Nye Tian directly. The strength of the dragon vein in his body was definitely not something that Nye Tian could imagine. Boom! As Qi Yifeng's sneer fell, the void trembled slightly, and then the blood-red ghost head blade appeared once again. A fierce blade momentum suddenly bloomed, turning into a sharp blade light that slashed towards Nye Tian. Ridiculous! Nye Tian roared in a low voice as a pair of astral soul wings appeared on his back. Leaping into the air, he simultaneously unleashed a heaven slash of the sword Absolute Heaven. Bang! In midair, the blade and the sword clashed against each other, resulting in a thunderous boom, after which countless blade lights and sword shadows erupted, transforming into a violent sword intent that dissipated in the air. Do you think I'm more stupid than Lai Yu? Nye Tian stabilized his body in midair, coldly laughing at Qi Yifeng, after which, he shifted his gaze to the other scarlet-red silhouette. It was the person who attacked earlier, Qi Gui. Nye Tian, you are indeed a little troublesome. However, your strength is ultimately limited. In the hands of Qi Gui, how many moves can you withstand? Qi Yifeng couldn't help but be stunned when he saw Nye Tian blocking Qi Gui's attack, after which, a cold smile appeared on his face. He was actually very confident in Qi Gui's strength. Nye Tian's gaze sank as he stared at Qi Gui. Earlier, he had forcefully blocked that attack. Qi Gui's strength had exceeded his expectations. He was actually at the Saber Essence realm. In other words, Qi Gui's way of the blade was the same as Jianwuya's way of the sword. He was not affected by the restriction. Although Qi Gui was only an early overgod, his battle prowess was similar to Jianwuya's. He was much more terrifying than Lai Yu. Nye Tian, you can't use the power of the black talisman you just used to kill Jianwuya again, right? I'd like to see just how you're going to fight Qi Gui. Qi Yifeng sneered as his eyes were filled with mockery. He had seen that Nye Tian had used a powerful trump card to kill Jianwuya. If he fought Qi Gui now, it would be extremely dangerous. Qi Yifeng had killed Lai Yu to prevent the latter from standing on Nye Tian's side. Although Lai Yu and Nye Tian did not get along, there were times when enemies could work together to deal with a powerful enemy. Nye Tian's eyebrows furrowed, his face grim. Without the dragon inscription talisman, it was indeed very difficult for him to deal with Qi Gui. Die! Just at this moment, Qi Gui made his move once again. His figure flashed, and his entire body was like a domineering blade with the head of a ghost, releasing a violent blade intent. As the blade slashed down, a dazzling blade light shot out in the air, and the majestic blade shadow smashed towards Nye Tian with the pressure of Mount Tai. Seeing this, Nie Tian flapped his wings and retreated at an extremely fast speed. At the same time, he stabbed out with his sword, slightly blocking the wild blade force and narrowly dodging Qi Gui's full power attack. Qi Gui's blade intent was abnormally overbearing and extremely powerful. It was even more powerful than Jian Wuya's from before. Without the dragon inscription talisman, Nie Tian did not dare to face Qi Gui head-on. Nie Tian, you're very smart. You used your agility to not face Qi Gui head-on. Qi Yifeng could not help but laugh when he saw Nie Tian avoid head-on. Afterwards, his face suddenly sank and he suddenly looked at Chen Wuqing and the others. He laughed awkwardly. If your friend was in danger, would you still hide? Nie Tian's eyes slightly narrowed. Qi Yifeng was too despicable. Even when he had the upper hand, he still wanted to use the lives of others to threaten Nie Tian. Kill. Qi Gui, of course, understood Qi Yifeng's meaning. With a low roar, his figure flashed like a blade and actually attacked Chen Wuqing's group. Boom! With a slash, the scarlet blade light was like the setting sun, illuminating half of the sky. A violent bloody aura was released, pressing down on Chen Wuqing's group. Chen Wuqing was currently standing together with Yang Zhongqiu's group. He suddenly felt a wild pressure pressing down on him, causing his chest to sink, and he actually felt like he was suffocating. Qi Gui's strength had exceeded Chen Wuqing's expectations. The latter did not even have the strength to resist. Chen Wuqing could not imagine how Nie Tian could fight against Qi Gui. The violent blade aura suddenly descended. If this blade landed, Chen Wuqing's group would undoubtedly die. Despicable! Seeing that Chen Wuqing's group was in danger, Nie Tian couldn't help but frown. After which, he let out a low roar and the wings on his back abruptly flapped. His silhouette was like the wind and lightning as he flew over. At the same time, he activated his Astral Soul armor and Astral Soul shield, appearing in midair and blocking that tyrannical blade attack. Chapter 1607. Nie Tian. Seeing Nie Tian embedded into the ground, Chen Wuqing and the rest couldn't help but exclaim in shock. Bang! Just at this moment, the ground trembled as a silhouette leapt out. This silhouette was none other than Nie Tian. At this moment, Nie Tian's entire body was drenched in blood, as though he was heavily injured. Only his eyes were still emitting a divine light. Facing Qi Gui's saber head-on, even if he activated the Astral Soul armor and Astral Soul shield, he would still be heavily injured. Not dead. Qi Gui's silhouette stood in the air. Seeing that Nie Tian wasn't dead, he couldn't help but speak in a heavy tone. His voice was extremely cold, exuding a chill that would cause others to shiver. Qi Gui followed behind Qi Yifeng throughout the year, like a shadow of the latter. He would only appear when it was necessary. No one knew what such a person was thinking every day. At least from Nie Tian's point of view, Qi Gui was no longer a normal person, but a pure killing machine. A saber hidden behind Qi Yifeng's back, emotionless and emotionless, with only the simplest of reactions. You think you can kill me with a single saber? Aren't you overestimating yourself a little too much? Nie Tianling laughed. His body trembled as he swept away the blood stains on his body. A pair of resolute eyes emitted a cold, killing intent. Facing an expert like Qi Gui, what Nie Tian revealed was not fear, but an intense killing intent and battle intent. This was his martial Tao. No matter what opponent he faced, he would never fear. Qi Gui let out a muffled snort as the saber qi around him began to violently spread out, causing the air to be filled with an extremely bloody aura. The saber soul entered the marrow. This was the essence of the saber. The terrifying aspect of a saber wielder was that when the saber intent reached the pinnacle, even the marrow would be filled with a terrifying saber intent. Little girl, do you want to escape? At this moment, Qi Yifeng's voice suddenly rang out. His silhouette flickered as he casually slapped out with his palm. A shadow of a scarlet moon appeared, crazily surging in the air like a ball of fire. Not far away from the peak of the crimson moon, Luo Xian's figure was forced to stagnate. She wanted to retreat, but she was a step too late. She was directly hit by the crimson moon's phantom image, and abruptly flew out. Although she finally stabilized her figure, her injuries were not light. Her delicate face revealed a look of horror. She originally wanted to take advantage of the chaos to leave, but she didn't expect that Qi Yifeng had been paying attention to everyone. Destiny was Scarlet Moon Peak's secret. Even if Luo Xian did not know what destiny meant, he would not allow the latter to leave. Crimson Moon Palace Mistress, do you know that I'm no longer a member of the Shattering Cloud Divine Palace? I'm now the direct disciple of Tower Master Qianyu. Luo Xian calmed herself down. Obviously, with her strength, it was impossible for her to escape from Qi Yifeng's grasp, so she could only bring up Thousand Feather Building. Unfortunately, Luo Xian didn't know what a Destined One was. The Destined One was a very mysterious organization. It was a powerful organization that had been entangled with the Dragon Rebel clan for hundreds of thousands of years, which had wiped out countless races in ancient times. How would the Destined One take the small Thousand Feather Tower seriously? Humph! Qi Yifeng stared at Luo Xian coldly and chuckled strangely. Luo Xian, I thought you were smart. I didn't think you'd be the same as that idiot teacher of yours, Lai Yu. You're both idiot. You think too highly of yourself if you think a mere Thousand Feather Tower can make me stop. Let alone the fact that you're Tower Master Qianyu's disciple. Even if Tower Master Qianyu comes in person, he won't be able to leave. Qi Yifeng's eyes darkened as soon as he finished speaking. A terrifying draconic aura suddenly radiated from him, condensing into a vague image of a dragon. It was extremely strange. Nie Tian glanced at Qi Yifeng and suddenly sensed that something was off. His eyes trembled as he discovered that Qi Yifeng's strength had increased once again. He had reached the early paramount god level. How is this possible? Yao Chen by the side also discovered this and involuntarily cried out in shock. He was extremely astonished. Qi Yifeng's increase in strength was far too strange. First, he went from mid-overgod to peak-overgod, and now he had broken through to the paramount god level. It was far too terrifying. His ley line is growing stronger and stronger. At almost the same time, Fat Cat also sensed that something was off. He let out a strange cry and actually felt a little frightened. Qi Yifeng's strength had been increasing without him even realizing it. It was because his ley line was growing stronger and stronger. It was just that not long ago, he had broken through the restrictions on the ley line, and it had been growing stronger and stronger. It was as if the energy of the Mother Earth in the air was madly gathering around him. This restriction power. Suddenly, Nie Tian sensed something and said in surprise, "Why does it feel so familiar?" He suddenly sensed that the restriction power in Qi Yifeng's body was actually quite familiar. "Mister, it's the absolute shadow restriction." Nie Qiu also thought of something and couldn't help but let out a strange cry. He reminded Nie Tian. Absolute shadow restriction. Nie Tian was stunned when he heard those words. His eyes couldn't help but tremble violently. The absolute shadow restriction. It turned out that the restriction on Qi Yifeng's ley line was the absolute shadow restriction. No wonder Nie Tian felt that it was familiar. Because every member of the Dragon Rebel clan had the absolute shadow restriction. According to Black Dragon Demon Saint Ni Jianming, the absolute shadow restriction on the members of the Dragon Rebel clan had been left behind by a mysterious and powerful organization, the Absolute Shadow Temple. Back then, the Dragon Rebel clan had crazily destroyed the other clans because they had been threatened by the Absolute Shadow Temple. If the Dragon Rebel clan didn't destroy the other clans, their clan would be destroyed. Nie Tian had even met an elder of the Absolute Shadow Temple. To be precise, it was only a clone of that elder. In the end, this clone had become Nie Qiu, who was now the physical body of the corpse demon lord. Nie Tian had never thought that the restriction on Qi Yifeng's ley line would be the absolute shadow restriction. The absolute shadow restriction came from the absolute shadow temple, and Qi Yifeng was one of the fated one. Could there be a connection between the absolute shadow temple and the fated one? Or could it be that the fated one had always been a member of the absolute shadow temple? Thinking of this, cold sweat broke out on Nie Tian's forehead. It seemed that the relationship between the fated one and the absolute shadow temple was far more complicated than he had imagined. Qi Yifeng froze for a moment. His eyes were filled with surprise. He said in surprise, "I never thought that you would know about the absolute shadow restriction." Qi Yifeng was very surprised to hear the name of the absolute shadow restriction from Nie Tian and Nie Chio's mouths. It seemed that Nie Tian knew more than he had expected. Since that was the case, he had no reason to let Nie Tian leave here alive. "Qi Yifeng, who the hell are you?" Nie Tian calmed down a little. He looked at Qi Yifeng and growled. He could sense that the aura of the absolute shadow restriction on Qi Yifeng's ley line was similar to the absolute shadow restriction of the Dragon Rebel clan, but its function was completely different. The absolute shadow restriction of the Dragon Rebel clan suppressed their strength, while the absolute shadow restriction on Qi Yifeng's ley line greatly stimulated his strength. Because of this, Qi Yifeng's strength had skyrocketed through the absolute shadow restriction. Chapter 1608. Nie Tian knew too much, and there was no way Crimson Moon Feng would allow him to walk out of here alive. With a grim look in his eyes, Nie Tian asked coldly, "Qi Yifeng, are you that confident in your own strength? Even if Crimson Moon Feng were an early paramount god, he would still be suppressed by the ancient warding spell. He could easily kill Nie Tian and the others." Humph! Inexplicably, Crimson Moon Feng chuckled. "Let me tell you something, Nie Tian. The Vanishing Shadow Warding spell on my Dragon Meridian is a heaven-level Vanishing Shadow Warding spell. It can stimulate martial bodies to a level that you can't even begin to imagine. Once I break it, I'll be able to push my strength to the peak of the paramount level." "The peak of the paramount level?" Nie Tian said, his eyes widening. Who could have guessed that a mere Vanishing Shadow Warding spell would contain such terrifying power that it could push an overgod to the peak of the paramount level? Even in the 9 realms, there weren't many peak paramount experts. Nie Tian guessed that the heaven-level Vanishing Shadow Warding spell that Crimson Moon Feng was talking about was some sort of oppressive cultivation technique. In the beginning, the heaven-level Vanishing Shadow Warding spell would suppress Crimson Moon Feng's Dragon Meridian, and at the same time, absorb its power. Once the warding spell was broken, all of the accumulated power would be unleashed, and the cultivator would experience a rapid increase in strength. According to Crimson Moon Feng, the Vanishing Shadow Warding spell was very complicated, and had different levels. It was hard to say how the heaven-level Vanishing Shadow Warding spell ranked among all the other Vanishing Shadow Warding spells. A small restriction had created a supreme pinnacle powerhouse. This was just too terrifying. If Crimson Moon Feng really was a peak paramount god, then even with the ancient warding spell, Nie Tian wouldn't be able to fight him. Seeing Nie Tian's shocked expression, Crimson Moon Feng chuckled disdainfully and said, "Do you still think I'm overconfident, Nie Tian?" It was precisely because his strength was skyrocketing that he dared to say that even if Master Qian Yu came here personally, he would also die here. "Calm down, Nie Tian," Fat Cat said. "He's still getting stronger. As long as he doesn't reach the peak paramount god level, we'll still have a chance to kill him." "Yes." Nie Tian suddenly came to a realization. He nodded heavily, and his eyes regained their firmness. But the problem in front of him was how to deal with this troublesome fellow, Crimson Ghost. "Luoxian, I'll block Crimson Moon Peak. You go help Nie Tian." At this moment Yao Chen's figure suddenly moved. He leaped into the air, and blocked in front of Qi Yifeng as he spoke to Luoxian. Luoxian's beautiful eyes flickered. She then looked at Nie Tian. The two of them were mortal enemies. Would they really join forces? Luo Xian, if you don't want to die, then be smart and make a wise choice. Nie Tian suddenly looked at Luo Xian and said in a cold tone. Yao Chen was very smart. He wanted Luo Xian and Nie Tian to join forces. If Luo Xian and Nie Tian activated the Thousand Feathers formation and the forbidden space of the Milky Way at the same time, they might be able to achieve a miraculous result. Luo Xian didn't hesitate for long. She nodded slightly and moved to a place not far away from Nie Tian. At this point, if she wanted to survive, she had no other choice but to join forces with Nie Tian. Yao Chen, I really want to know what's the relationship between you and Nie Tian. Why do you keep helping him? Qi Yifeng looked at Yao Chen. He wasn't in a hurry to act. His strength was still skyrocketing, so he wasn't in a hurry. When his strength reached the peak, Nie Tian, Yao Chen, and the others would all die. Qi Yifeng, I'm not helping Nie Tian. I'm helping my junior brother. Yao Chen smiled faintly. He was confident that before Qi Yifeng's strength reached the peak, he could use his own formation to delay Qi Yifeng. Junior brother? Qi Yifeng was stunned. He then looked at the person behind Yao Chen. He didn't know who Yao Chen's junior brother was. Palace Lord of Medicine King, you're the eldest senior brother that teacher mentioned? At this moment, Ed suddenly thought of something and exclaimed in surprise. Yao Chen turned around and looked at Ed. He smiled and said, Little junior brother, you're not bad. No wonder teacher specifically told me to protect you in secret. Eldest senior brother? Little junior brother? On the other side, Nie Tian couldn't help but be stunned when he saw this scene. He immediately understood. He could tell that Yao Chen was protecting Ed. He also guessed that there might be some secret relationship between the two. He didn't think that Yao Chen was Ming Hui's disciple. At this moment, Nie Tian remembered that when Ming Hui told him to go to the Medicine King Pellet Pavilion, he gave him a Medicine King's Jade card. At that time, he was curious about the relationship between Ming Hui and the Palace Lord. Why would he have a Medicine King's Jade card? It was truly unexpected that the Palace Lord was Ming Hui's disciple. Yao Chen, it seems that there's a big shot behind you. I've underestimated you. Qi Yifeng sneered. Then, his qi began to surge. It seemed that he was about to make his move. Yao Chen faintly smiled. He wasn't afraid at all. A strange barrier was being emitted from his body. Inside the barrier, Yao Chen could resist the ancient restrictions and suppress Qi Yifeng's strength. Therefore, he wasn't afraid at all. At least, he could delay Qi Yifeng. At the same time, on the other side, two ants. Qi Gui stood in the sky and spoke coldly. He obviously didn't put Nie Tian and Luo Xian in his eyes. Thousand Cloud Barrier, open! Luo Xian was very decisive. She directly opened the Thousand Cloud Barrier. An invisible barrier filled the space within 10,000 meters, enveloping Nie Tian and Qi Gui. Inside the Thousand Cloud Barrier, Luo Xian felt that time flowed much slower than the outside world. Therefore, her speed and strength would increase by several fold. With just her speed, she could dodge Qi Gui's attack. This way, at least she wouldn't lose. Qi Gui sensed something. He frowned and growled, something strange. He obviously didn't know that Luo Xian had opened the barrier. He only felt that his blade intent was slightly suppressed and his qi had a slight change. Therefore, he felt that something was wrong. Forbidden Space Galaxy, open! Almost at the same time, the corner of Nie Tian's lips curled up. The Forbidden Space Galaxy was activated and perfectly merged with the Thousand Cloud Barrier. The Forbidden Space Galaxy covered the Thousand Cloud Barrier. The time flow that Nie Tian felt was the same as Luo Xian's. Nie Tian, you. Luo Xian suddenly realized something. Her beautiful eyes flickered with extreme viciousness, and at the same time, great shock. She could feel that the barrier that Nie Tian had opened was very strange. It was even scarier than her Thousand Cloud Barrier. If they were to fight head-on, The forbidden space galaxy was enough to break through the 1,000-cloud barrier. Luo Xian, do you think that you're the only one who knows how to use barriers? Nie Tianling laughed. He didn't want to join hands with Luo Xian. But in this situation, he had no other choice. Luo Xian frowned. Her eyes were filled with fear. At this moment, she knew that she had no advantage in front of Nie Tian. Chapter 1609. Luo Xian, focus on the enemy in front of you. I'm not interested in your life right now. Nie Tian saw Luo Xian's stiff expression and cold smiled as he reminded her. Even though he and Luo Xian opened the barrier at the same time, the enemy they were facing was a Master God-level blade user. It won't be easy for them to win. I don't need you to remind me, Luo Xian coldly replied. Her silhouette flickered as the Yuan spirit sword, the 1,000-cloud violet mist, appeared. Her silhouette was fast to the extreme as she stabbed out with her sword. Nie Tian looked at Luo Xian's figure from inside the barrier. She wasn't very fast, but he knew that if he was looking from outside, Luo Xian's speed had already reached the level of one step, one shadow. The increase in speed caused the power of Luo Xian's sword to increase greatly. The sharp sword flew towards Qi Gui. The latter didn't even have time to react. Luo Xian was also a sword user and her sword path had reached the sword bone realm. Her sword path strength was already very terrifying. Bang! The sword landed on Qi Gui's body, but it was blocked by a formless aura. Qi Gui's figure was forced to retreat. What a fast speed! Qi Gui's strength was tyrannical after all. He took Luo Xian's sword head-on, but he wasn't injured. After he stabilized his body, he looked at Luo Xian with a strange expression. He was extremely shocked. Luo Xian's strength was below his in every aspect, but her speed was so fast, it was really terrifying. The essence of the saber spirit fuses with the bone marrow, the martial body is indeed powerful. Luo Xian's figure moved and retreated 1,000 meters to increase the distance between her and Qi Gui. The corner of her mouth trembled as she murmured. Qi Gui's strength was very tyrannical. Just by relying on the saber aura of his body, he was able to block her sword. Die! Qi Gui's eyes suddenly darkened as he released his killing intent. The ghost-head saber fiercely slashed out. The sky was filled with blood-colored saber shadows. It was like a landslide, and a tsunami was crazily pressing towards Luo Xian. Qi Gui was very smart. Facing an agile cultivator like Luo Xian, he could only use a large area of effect martial technique to make her unable to dodge. Luo Xian's beautiful eyes flickered, after which she released the 1,000-cloud dark force from her entire body, condensing it on the tip of the 1,000-cloud purple mist sword. Instantly, sword light erupted forth, blossoming in the air like a purple rainbow, madly rushing over. Luo Xian forcefully broke through Qi Gui's attack. She took a step in the air and rose into the air. Bang, bang, bang. However, at this moment, the blade shadows in the air bombarded the invisible energy shield, making loud noises. Luo Xian's body trembled slightly as she felt an invisible pressure bearing down on her. She was unable to bear it and coughed up a mouthful of blood. Qi Gui's blade intent was forceful and overbearing. It had a huge impact on the barrier. If it was Luo Xian's 1,000 clouds barrier alone, it would have already been broken. Fortunately, Nie Tian's celestial river forbidden space array was able to maintain the barrier. Barrier! Qi Gui felt the void tremble and immediately understood. Luo Xian had unknowingly opened a barrier. No wonder her speed was so fast. Break for me! Qi Gui roared in a low voice as he slashed out with his great blade. The tyrannical blade shadows were like a flood dragon breaking out of the abyss, violently rushing over. Not good! Nie Tian couldn't help but frown upon seeing this, after which, his silhouette flickered, rushing towards Qi Gui. He had the astral wings, in addition to the 1,000 clouds barrier. His speed was even faster than Luo Xian's. Nie Tian knew that his celestial river forbidden space array was enough to withstand Qi Gui's attack. However, Luo Xian's thousand clouds barrier wasn't able to withstand it. Although Luo Xian had the thousand cloud dark body, compared to Nie Tian, her martial physique was still far from being able to withstand an attack of this level. In fact, when Nie Tian and Luo Xian joined forces, the latter didn't even need to act. He only needed to borrow the thousand clouds barrier to fight against Qi Gui. World-devouring sword dragon. Nie Tian was in midair, the blood qi and sword intent surrounding his body surged. Boundless array runes condensed in an instant as a sword intent dragon appeared, blasting towards Qi Gui. Facing an expert like Qi Gui, Nie Tian didn't hesitate and directly used the celestial river forbidden space array. If Qi Gui wanted to break the barrier, Nie Tian would definitely make him pay the heaviest price. Huh! Qi Gui felt a powerful aura rushing towards him. His expression couldn't help but sink as he exclaimed in surprise. After which, the ghost-headed great blade turned and slashed down towards Nie Tian. The power of Nie Tian's sword was too great. Not only that, Qi Gui's strength was also being suppressed by the celestial river forbidden space array. If he didn't retaliate, he would definitely be heavily injured. Chi. The ghost-headed great blade slashed down, causing a dazzling light to appear in the air. At the same time, an ear-piercing sound rang out. Rumble. The next moment, the extremely powerful and tyrannical blade landed on the sword dragon's body. There was a loud bang in the void, and a violent wave of qi suddenly shot out in all directions. Chi. The blade and the sword collided in the air, and the whole space seemed to be torn apart, making an ear-piercing sound. Billowing waves of sword and saber qi roared incessantly, wreaking havoc in the space. The sharp qi seemed to be able to tear and devour everything. Nie Tian felt a violent force rushing towards him. His figure moved and he dodged in time. With the support of the thousand cloud barrier, his speed was enough to avoid the terrifying impact. On the other hand, Qi Gui wasn't so lucky. His figure was like a lone boat in a tempestuous storm as he was blasted flying. Boundless blade and sword intent smashed onto his body, and even if his martial body was strong, shocking wounds were still forcefully slashed open on his body. Nie Tian stabilized his body in the air. His eyes couldn't help but tremble. He didn't expect that the power of that sword strike would be so powerful. It seemed that under the support of the thousand clouds boundary, the forbidden space of the Milky Way's suppression was even more obvious. Crimson Ghost's strength was directly suppressed to below high god rank. Ah! Crimson Ghost's figure drew a trail of blood in the air before he finally stabilized himself. Then, he let out a furious roar like a mad beast. He didn't expect that he would be so heavily injured while fighting against Nie Tian. Impossible! Crimson Ghost's figure stabilized as he let out a deep roar. His body suddenly trembled as he spurted out a mouthful of fresh blood. He couldn't even stand straight anymore. Nie Tian slightly frowned. Seeing that Crimson Ghost was heavily injured, his eyes couldn't help but flicker. Then, his figure moved and he madly attacked. Take your life while you're down. Nie Tian naturally understood this logic. Since Crimson Ghost was already heavily injured, then of course, he must take this opportunity to kill him. Ah! When Qi Gui saw Nie Tian charging towards him, he suddenly let out a wild roar. His eyes turned crimson, and all the blood and qi in his body began to burn, fusing with the berserk tyrannical saber intent, condensing into a soaring saber aura. Not good! Seeing this, Nie Tian was stunned. Instantly, his body stopped moving and he madly retreated. He didn't expect Crimson Ghost to be so courageous. He ignited his blood and wanted to die together with him. But Nie Tian wasn't that stupid. He already had the absolute advantage. Why must he fight against Crimson Ghost? Break! However, at this moment, Crimson Ghost roared. His figure moved and a fierce blade shadow appeared around his body as he madly rushed towards the sky. Chapter 16:10. Within the enchantment, Nye Tian sensed that Qi Gui wanted to break through the enchantment and his expression instantly changed. He wanted to stop him but it was already too late. Boom! Crack! In the next moment, Qi Gui's figure was like a huge blade as it heavily slammed onto the enchantment, causing the void to shake violently. Following that, a crisp explosion sound could be heard as a glaring crack appeared on the enchantment and instantly expanded. Bang! In just a moment, the enchantment could not withstand the huge impact and directly collapsed. The 10th Meridian Origin Star Stone in Nye Tian's body felt the impact and his body couldn't help but tremble as he spat out a mouthful of fresh blood. His figure retreated a few steps in the air and almost couldn't stand. Nye Tian. The others saw that Nye Tian was injured and exclaimed in unison. Just now, Nye Tian and Luo Xian's battle with Qi Gui was soul-stirring and everyone didn't even dare to breathe loudly. No one would have thought that the seemingly overbearing Qi Gui would suddenly become so weak and was heavily injured by Nye Tian's sword. However, at this moment, Qi Gui broke through the enchantment and seemed to have heavily injured Nye Tian. It was extremely strange. How could this be? Nye Tian flapped his wings and stabilized his body as his eyes were filled with shock. He didn't think that the enchantment would be so weak and was instantly broken by Qi Gui. Moreover, he was heavily injured. He clearly felt that after the Thousand Cloud enchantment and Star River Forbidden Space fused together, it was extremely sturdy. Qi Gui's burning blood Qi attack couldn't break the enchantment so easily. Luo Xian. In the next moment, Nye Tian suddenly understood something and turned around to look at Luo Xian. The latter was dressed in white and stood in the air, completely unharmed. Nye Tian, this can't be blamed on me. He's simply too strong. Luo Xian looked at Nye Tian and said calmly yet coldly. The reason why Qi Gui easily broke through the enchantment and heavily injured Nye Tian was because Luo Xian closed the Thousand Cloud enchantment at the last moment. It was obvious that Luo Xian didn't want to get hurt, so she closed the Thousand Clouds barrier and let Nye Tian bear Crimson Ghost's attack alone. What a ruthless woman! Nye Tian spat out a mouthful of filthy blood and roared in his heart. Luo Xian was too vicious, always betraying Nye Tian at the critical moment. If she hadn't closed the Thousand Clouds barrier, even if the fusion barrier was broken, Nye Tian wouldn't have been seriously injured. And this woman actually had the cheek to say that it was not her fault. At the same time, Qi Yifeng and Yao Chen were still facing each other. Surprisingly, neither of them made a move. Yao Chen only wanted to stall Qi Yifeng and prevent him from interfering with the battle between Nye Tian and Qi Gui. Qi Yifeng, on the other hand, didn't want to do anything. He was waiting for his strength to rise to the pinnacle. Qi Gui broke through the enchantment. His entire body was covered in blood and his blood qi was still burning. He suddenly glanced at Qi Yifeng but the latter completely ignored him. In Qi Yifeng's eyes, Qi Gui was only a dog. If this dog couldn't help his master eliminate the enemy, then there was no value in his existence. 2 ants die for me. Qi Gui's eyes trembled for a moment before looking at Nye Tian and Luo Xian. He let out a furious roar. Using the power brought by burning his blood qi, he directly slashed out with his saber towards Luo Xian. With one slash, countless saber shadows appeared. The sky was filled with blood-red saber shadows, like a falling sea of blood, crashing towards Luo Xian. Under this level of attack, even if Luo Xian activated the Thousand Clouds barrier, she wouldn't be able to dodge it. And without the power boost brought by the Star River Forbidden Space, it was impossible for her to resist Qi Gui's blood qi burning saber. At this moment, Luo Xian suddenly looked at Nye Tian. Her pair of cold eyes flickered as if she was asking for help. But Nye Tian's reaction was abnormally cold. After Luo Xian had just betrayed him, how could he still save her? Luo Xian, this woman, was far too evil. There was no need to save her. Luo Xian's expression stiffened. Feeling the presence of death descending upon her, her eyes were filled with fear. Then, she became determined. A terrifying thousand clouds dark force surged from her body, clearly intending to resist Qi Gui's fatal saber. Although Luo Xian wasn't strong, her desire to live was extremely strong. Even in this situation where she was at an absolute disadvantage, she still wanted to fight back. This woman is a little interesting. At this moment, an extremely playful voice rang out from the void. It had a tinge of mockery in it. Eh. Hearing this voice, Nie Tian's eyes couldn't help but tremble. He exclaimed, "It's that guy." Nie Tian was extremely familiar with this voice. It was the person he had met not long ago, Lai Yin Jiufeng. Lai Yin Jiufeng, this guy hasn't left. At the same time, Fat Cat's voice also rang out. It was actually a little shaky. Could he have seen through it? Seen through it? Nie Tian was stunned. He didn't understand what Fat Cat meant. He remembered that Fat Cat seemed to really want Lai Yin Jiufeng to leave at the time. When the latter left, Fat Cat looked like she was relieved of a great burden. It was as if Fat Cat was worried about something. Thousand Cloud's dark body, one of the 4 great ancient forbidden bodies. Her talent isn't bad. In the next moment, Lai Yin Jiufeng's voice rang out once more. It was extremely playful as he stared at Luo Xian with his fiery eyes. He murmured, "Betraying your companions at a critical moment, you sure are vicious. Wouldn't it be too much of a pity if such a special woman were to die like this?" As the playful voice faded, Lai Yin Jiufeng's figure immediately moved. Like a ball of fire, he directly charged towards the boundless sea of blade intent. Like a flame, Lai Yin Jiufeng passed through the sea of blade intent around Qi Gui and instantly arrived beside Luo Xian. He released a transparent barrier around his body, protecting Luo Xian. The boundless blade intent fell, but it was unable to break the barrier. Luo Xian was completely unharmed. Qi Gui's figure froze in midair as the blood in his body quickly flowed away. He looked in shock at Lai Yin Jiufeng and said in astonishment, "Who are you?" Strange flames surged around Lai Yin Jiufeng's body. It was as if his entire body was condensed from flames. It was extremely strange. "Is there even a need for you to know who I am?" Lai Yin Jiufeng smiled coldly. A strange light shone in his eyes. Qi Gui's mouth suddenly opened wide. He seemed to feel something and wanted to say something, but he couldn't make a sound. In the next moment, a strange scene occurred. Qi Gui's body suddenly surged with a fiery light before exploding. His entire body was instantly burned to ashes by the flames. When Lai Yin Jiufeng saved Luo Xian just now, he seemed to have left something in Qi Gui's body and killed him directly. Everyone looked at the scene in the sky in shock. They were so shocked that they couldn't say a word. Lai Yin Jiufeng had suddenly appeared and instantly killed Qi Gui. His methods were far too strange. Power of golden flames! At this moment, Fat Cat's voice suddenly rang. She actually cried out in shock. Nie Tian was stunned for a moment before coming to a realization. Lai Yin Jiufeng had left the power of golden flames in Qi Gui's body and instantly killed the latter. The power of golden flames was indeed terrifying. It instantly killed a powerful blade wielder. The golden lion possessed the power of golden flames. No wonder it could become one of the 4 great ancient beasts. Lai Yin Jiufeng, why did he return? In the next moment, Nie Tian immediately calmed down and said in shock, "Didn't he already leave to find a way to create the pulse of 3 life?" In an instant Nie Tian was confused. If Lai Yin Jiufeng hadn't even created the pulse of 3 life, how could he have such great strength? Chapter 16:11. The Tear of a Princess. Nie Tian's expression darkened when he heard Fat Cat's words. So Lai Yin Jiufeng had come back for the tear of a princess. Sigh. Fat Cat suddenly sighed and said, "This noble one had thought that he had left because he didn't notice the tear of a princess. I didn't think that he would be so cunning as to stay here all this time." He didn't leave all this time? Nie Tian was stunned for a moment before he realized that Lai Yin Jiufeng hadn't left the door of golden flames. He had been following them in secret. What a cunning Lai Yin Jiufeng! Luo Xian was standing next to Lai Yin Jiufeng. Her exquisite face was filled with astonishment. She didn't think that someone like this would appear at her moment of life and death. But Lai Yin Jiufeng didn't even look at Luo Xian. He had saved her on a whim. It was that simple. Kid, you should know why I'm here, right? Lai Yin Jiufeng stared playfully at Nie Tian and smiled. Didn't you leave already, Lai Yin Jiufeng? Nie Tian asked coldly, feigning ignorance. Lai Yin Jiufeng let out an odd laugh and raised an eyebrow. You look like a smart person. You don't really believe my words, do you? Earlier, Lai Yin Jiufeng had said that he would leave this place and find a way to create another Yuan meridian. Nie Tian had believed him. But now, he was starting to doubt it. If Lai Yin Jiufeng didn't even have the veins of 3 lives, there was no way he could have instantly killed Qi Gui. Nie Tian's eyes trembled when he probed with his consciousness. He suddenly discovered that Lai Yin Jiufeng was a mid-stage high god. Moreover, Lai Yin Jiufeng had 9 veins of 3 lives inside his body. You were lying to me before? Nie Tian finally realized that Lai Yin Jiufeng had been lying to him at the door of golden flames. You've only realized now? Lai Yin Jiufeng sneered and said, You actually believe the words of a stranger? It looks like I overestimated you a little. You. Nie Tian felt his chest tighten. His face darkened, and he actually couldn't speak for a time. He never thought that Lai Yin Jiufeng would be so cunning. Perhaps it was because Nie Tian sensed the same aura from Lai Yin Jiufeng as Cher did. That was why he let down his guard and truly believed Lai Yin Jiufeng's words. Kid, you have something that doesn't belong to you. It belongs to the ancient Ming. I just want to take it back. I'm not going overboard, am I? Lai Yin Jiufeng's eyes turned cold as he stared straight at Nie Tian. Nie Tian couldn't help but shudder when he heard Lai Yin Jiufeng's words. Lai Yin Jiufeng really did come for the tear of the princess. He could not understand how Lai Yin Jiufeng was able to create the meridian of 3 lives when he had been sealed in the door of golden flames all this time. Lai Yin Jiufeng, it's not up to you to decide whether that thing belongs to the ancient Ming or not. Nie Tian stared darkly at Lai Yin Jiufeng and said, Since Cher left it to me, I will take good care of it. Lai Yin Jiufeng smiled cold and looked extremely disdainful. He said, It looks like you're not going to hand over the tear of the princess obediently. Come and take it yourself if you can. Nie Tian's reply was just as cold. It was at this time that Qi Yefeng finally reacted. He stared at Lai Yin Jiufeng murderously and shouted angrily, Who are you? Lai Yin Jiufeng hadn't even looked at Qi Yefeng since he appeared. It was as if he didn't care about the latter at all. A martial practitioner with an innate dragon vein. Interesting. Only now did Lai Yin Jiufeng look at Qi Yefeng. He actually smiled playfully. There was no fear in his eyes at all. In fact, he was full of disdain. Who the hell are you, brat? Qi Yefeng had never been looked down upon like this before. He roared and unleashed his aura, turning it into a great pressure that pressed down on Qi Yefeng. Qi Yefeng's strength had skyrocketed to the late stage of the paramount god level after the vanishing shadow restriction was removed. He was showing signs of breaking through to the peak of the paramount god level. Boom! An extremely violent pressure grabbed at Lai Yin Jiufeng like a pair of invisible hands. Nie Tian couldn't help but narrow his eyes when he saw this. He really wanted to see just how strong Lai Yin Jiufeng was. He hadn't seen Lai Yin Jiufeng's true strength when he instantly killed Qi Gui. It was just amazing. It was only now that Lai Yin Jiufeng's strength was revealed. Using restrictions to suppress an innate dragon vein, and using the power of the restrictions to unleash the potential of the innate dragon vein in an instant is a good way to increase your strength. Lai Yin Jiufeng said indifferently in the face of Qi Yefeng's powerful pressure. Then, he changed the topic. It's a pity that you're too stupid. Your martial body isn't strong enough, and there are restrictions in this space. If you forcefully increase your strength, your innate dragon vein won't be able to withstand it. Break! In the next moment, Lai Yin Jiufeng let out a growl and thrust his palm forward. A scarlet fireball shot out and actually shattered Qi Yefeng's aura. In fact, it even forced Qi Yefeng to take a few steps back. Amazing! The crowd gasped when they saw this. They hadn't expected Lai Yin Jiufeng to be this strong. He was able to force Qi Yefeng back. Nie Tian frowned. He was confident that even if he was injured, he wouldn't fear Qi Yefeng's pressure. But it would be difficult to force him back. He has the meridians of 3 lives. He doesn't fear the ancient restrictions, Fat Cat said. Nie Tian's eyes narrowed. He suddenly realized that Lai Yin Jiufeng had the meridians of 3 lives. He didn't fear any restrictions. Shui Er's 3 lives meridians didn't fear any barriers, restrictions, or the suppression of an innate spirit body. Even Duguni's 100 void body didn't affect Shui Er at all. Lai Yin Jiufeng also had the meridians of 3 lives. Therefore, the restrictions didn't affect him at all. Lai Yin Jiufeng was a mid-stage high god. The restrictions didn't affect him at all. Qi Yefeng was a late-stage paramount god. He was very strong, but the stronger he was, the stronger the restrictions would be. Therefore, his true battle prowess should be around the peak of high god. Perhaps when he broke through to the peak, his battle prowess would reach the level of an overgod. How is this possible? Qi Yefeng was forced to take a few steps back. After he stabilized himself, he couldn't help but stare at Lai Yin Jiufeng in astonishment. He wasn't just surprised by Lai Yin Jiufeng's strength, but also by what he had said. Lai Yin Jiufeng was right. As Qi Yefeng grew stronger, his innate dragon meridians were under tremendous pressure. They were on the verge of collapsing. However, Qi Yefeng had his own plans. Once his strength reached the pinnacle and he killed Nie Tian and the others, he would be able to obtain the earth vein source. As long as he absorbed some of the energy from the earth vein source, he would be able to restore his innate dragon meridians. Chapter 16:12. Lai Yin Jiufeng's sudden arrival disrupted Qi Yefeng's plans. If Lai Yin Jiufeng was just an ant, it would be fine. But this person's strength was very strange. He killed Qi Gui in one move and forced Qi Yefeng back. He was very difficult to deal with. You think I'm difficult to deal with, do you? Lai Yin Jiufeng looked at Qi Yefeng and said coolly with a playful smile. Kid, didn't you come here for Nie Tian's belongings? I can ignore Nie Tian and let you do whatever you want with him. Don't interfere in my affairs, how about it? Qi Yefeng's eyes flickered as he responded in a deep voice. He was actually showing weakness. He did not want to become enemies with Lai Yin Jiufeng. His target was not Nie Tian, but the earth vein source. He wanted to kill Nie Tian because Nie Tian was in his way. If Lai Yin Jiufeng was willing to kill Nie Tian, it would save him a lot of trouble. Humph humph humph. Suddenly, Lai Yin Jiufeng laughed very loudly. He stopped after a long time and shook his head. You are called Qi Yefeng, right? It seems that you think of me as a 3-year-old child. Lai Yin Jiufeng's expression suddenly froze. He said, I did not come here for Nie Tian's things. I will take the earth vein source as well. In my opinion, you are even more dangerous than Nie Tian. You're probably thinking that as long as you walk out of here, you'll definitely kill me, right? Lai Yin Jiufeng had never walked out of the door of golden flames, but he was far more cunning than the average person. Lai Yin Jiufeng could see the killing intent in Qi Yefeng's eyes very clearly. However, because of the ancient restrictions here, Qi Yefeng's strength was greatly reduced. Otherwise, he would not have compromised with a higher god. Brat, it seems that you are determined to go against me. Qi Yefeng's eyes were as deep as water. He no longer concealed his killing intent. Idiot! Lai Yin Jiufeng stared at Crimson Moon Peak and growled cold. You think you can covet the earth vein source? What a joke! Lai Yin Jiufeng knew exactly what Qi Yefeng was thinking. Qi Yefeng definitely wanted to use the power of the earth vein source to recover his innate dragon vein. Unfortunately for him, Qi Yifeng couldn't obtain the earth vein source with him around. Arrogant! Crimson Moon Peak couldn't take it any longer. Howling in rage, he unleashed a powerful energy that pushed him all the way to the peak paramount god level. Die! Now that his strength had reached its peak, Crimson Moon Feng no longer hesitated. He let out a furious roar and slammed his palm down. The image of a crimson moon appeared. The crimson crescent moon was like a blade that took Lai Yin Jiufeng's life. Qi Yifeng knew that Lai Yin Jiufeng was the greatest threat to him, so he had to kill him first. You want to kill me just like that? Ridiculous! Lai Yin Jiufeng blurred into motion, summoning a golden blaze fireball and a pair of golden flame wings on his back. He retreated 1,000 meters away. Qi Yifeng's strength was at the peak of the paramount god level. Despite the restrictions, he could still unleash the power of an overgod. Every move he made was imbued with the power of overgod laws. Even Lai Yin Jiufeng would have to dodge. Nie Tian watched from the sidelines. He wanted to wait until Qi Yifeng and Lai Yin Jiufeng were both injured before making a move. But Lai Yin Jiufeng was very cunning. He walked up to Nie Tian and said, Nie Tian, this guy is hard to deal with. We need to work together. If his innate dragon vein breaks through, the ancient restrictions will be useless against him. Nie Tian narrowed his eyes and said coldly, Do you think I'll still believe you? It doesn't matter if you don't believe me. But you have to believe that, kitty. Lai Yin Jiufeng chuckled. Then, a surge of power surged out of his body and entered Nie Tian's body, helping him recover. Nie Tian was surprised. He didn't think that Lai Yin Jiufeng would help him recover. He's right, Nie Tian. When the pre-heaven dragon meridians reach their limit, they can indeed break through the ancient restrictive spells. At that point, you'll have to face a peak paramount god. Fat Cat said, You need to work together with Lai Yin Jiufeng to kill Qi Yifeng first. Nie Tian frowned slightly. It seemed that Lai Yin Jiufeng wasn't lying this time. Let's attack together, Lord Medicine King. Nie Tian instantly recovered some of his strength. His figure moved, and he leapt into the air as he shouted to Yao Chen beside him. Qi Yifeng's aura was still growing. His innate dragon vein was in a berserk state, and his draconic aura was overflowing as if he couldn't suppress it anymore. Just Nie Tian and Lai Yin Jiufeng weren't enough to fight Qi Yifeng. Why is Qi Yifeng's dragon vein so terrifying? Nie Tian frowned. His dragon vein was already the sovereign dragon vein, but why wasn't it as strong as Qi Yifeng's innate dragon vein? It was very strange. You vicious woman, come help me. Lai Yin Jiufeng frowned. For the first time, his expression turned serious. He shouted to Luo Zian. Luo Zian's eyes flashed, but she still moved to Lai Yin Jiufeng's side. Vicious woman, you just need to activate your 1,000 Clouds barrier. Leave the rest to us. Lai Yin Jiufeng shot Luo Zian a cold look. His eyes were filled with killing intent. He said, Remember, I don't like being betrayed. If you dare do what you did before, I guarantee that you will die a horrible death. Lai Yin Jiufeng had seen Luo Zian betray Nie Tian very clearly. In order to prevent Luo Zian from betraying him again, he had to give her a warning. Luo Zian felt extreme fear when she looked at Lai Yin Jiufeng's abyss-like eyes. His eyes were too terrifying. It was as if there was a bottomless darkness hidden in them. A single glance was enough to make anyone tremble and remember them for the rest of their lives. Luo Zian wasn't very strong, but her 1,000 Clouds barrier was very strange. As long as the barrier was present, Nie Tian and Lai Yin Jiufeng's strength would multiply. Nie Tian had the forbidden space of the galaxy, so he could use the 1,000 Clouds barrier's power to resist it. On the other hand, Lai Yin Jiufeng had the veins of 3 lives. The 1,000 Clouds barrier didn't suppress him. It only strengthened him. Nie Tian stopped hesitating when he sensed that the 1,000 Clouds barrier had been activated. He activated the forbidden space of the galaxy again and merged it with the 1,000 Clouds barrier. Nie Tian looked at Yao Chen and said in a deep voice, Lord Medicine King, You should also open the barrier. Amen. Yao Chen nodded slightly. Then, barrier energy surged out of his body and merged with Nie Tian and Luo Xian's barrier once more, forming a three-layered barrier. Yao Chen's control over his barrier was far better than Nie Tian and Luo Xian's. He could adjust his barrier according to the Thousand Clouds barrier and the forbidden space of the galaxy, allowing the three barriers to merge perfectly. The Palace Master of Medicine King is indeed not simple. Nie Tian felt the barrier energy Yao Chen released increase his strength again. At the same time, it suppressed Crimson Moon Peak's strength. Nie Tian, Lian Jiufeng, Yao Chen, and Luo Xian worked together to fight against Crimson Moon Peak. Chapter 1613. Qi Yifeng stood in the air and stared coldly at Nie Tian and the others. His eyes were filled with murderous intent. Do you think you can fight me with just a few ants? Qi Yifeng let out a cold roar, and an insolent aura filled the air. The terrifying dragon qi around him was extremely rich, surging and surging. Around him, a faint shadow of a giant dragon condensed. The might of the dragon shook the heavens, insufferably arrogant. So arrogant? Lian Jiufeng laughed awkwardly and said, "You should know that ants can kill an elephant." As he spoke, scarlet flames surged around Lian Jiufeng's body. It was the power of golden flames. It seemed to be because he was trapped in the door of golden flames, so his body contained a terrifying power of golden flames. "I'll kill you first," Qi Yifeng roared angrily. He then waved his hand and a scarlet moon appeared. It pressed down like a mountain. "Can you kill me?" Lian Jiufeng moved as fast as lightning. At the same time, he thrust his palm forward. A giant fireball whistled through the air and shot toward Qi Yifeng. Boom! There was a dull sound as the scarlet moon and the fireball collided. The violent power immediately exploded, turning into countless waves of air that spread in all directions. ZZZT ZZZT ZZZT. An ear-piercing sound rang out. Endless power wreaked havoc in the barrier. It was extremely terrifying. Bang bang bang. The next moment, the terrible impact spread to the edge of the ward, bombarding on the ward, bursting out a dull roar. The barrier shook violently as if it would collapse at any moment. Seeing this, Nie Tian surged out of his body and strengthened the barrier. Qi Yifeng's power was too great. The draconic aura around him weakened the barrier greatly, making it very fragile. Fortunately, this was a three-layered barrier. Otherwise, it wouldn't have been able to withstand this kind of impact. Even so, Yao Chen and Luo Xian's figures swayed. They had clearly suffered a great impact. In particular, Luo Xian's forehead was covered in beads of sweat, and her delicate face was stretched taut. She was not very strong, so it was very difficult for her to withstand this kind of impact. If Lian Jiufeng hadn't warned her again, Luo Xian definitely wouldn't have persisted. For some reason, Luo Xian seemed to be extremely afraid of Lian Jiufeng. It was an indescribable fear that seemed to come from her very soul. Nie Tian, attack! Lian Jiufeng steadied himself and growled. Nie Tian's countenance sank. The heaven slash of the sword Absolute Heaven flickered with a cold light as he slashed out with his sword. A vast and mighty sword shadow blasted out towards the scarlet moon edge. Bang! Before the sword shadow could get close to the crimson moon, it was blocked by the dragon qi around the latter. It immediately shattered and dissipated into sword intent. What a strong defense! Nie Tian's brows furrowed as he retreated a few hundred meters. He did not expect that the defense of the Crimson Crescent Edge would actually be so strong. His all-out strike actually did not have the slightest effect. You want to kill me with an attack of this level? Dream on. The Crimson Crescent Edge let out a cold roar as his aura became extremely violent. He took a step forward and threw a punch. The figure of a crimson dragon appeared and charged towards Nie Tian at an incredible speed. Roar! The dragon's roar shook the heavens and the earth. The terrifying dragon qi seemed to be able to tear everything apart as it roared towards them. Nie Tian frowned. He could easily dodge the attack with his speed, but he could not do so. If he dodged the attack, the dragon's shadow would definitely strike the barrier. This was equivalent to transferring the attack to Luo Xian and Yao Chen. 3 seals of the God of War, soul-severing heavenly seal, open. After thinking for a moment, Nie Tian's aura surged. He actually used the 3 seals of the God of War that he had not used for a long time. Countless rays of golden light appeared in the sky and charged towards the crimson dragon shadow. ZZZT ZZZT ZZZT. The crimson dragon shadow was extremely terrifying. It forcefully broke through the rays of golden light and charged towards Nie Tian. 8 Desolation Sword. Seeing this, Nie Tian struck out with his sword again. Surging sword chi condensed into a violent wave of air that surged towards the crimson dragon shadow. Rumble. With a loud bang, the sword shadow and the dragon shadow collapsed at the same time under the attack. They turned into sword intent and dragon chi and dissipated. Nie Tian's figure was forced to retreat. He almost lost his balance. Qi Yifeng's strength was beyond imagination. Even under the 3 layers of barriers, he was still ferocious and domineering. Boom! At this moment, Lian Jiufeng appeared behind Qi Yifeng out of nowhere. He thrust his palm forward and a giant palm of flames appeared in the sky and slammed down. Space trembled. It was as if even the air itself was about to ignite. Ridiculous! Qi Yifeng suddenly turned around and roared. The dragon chi around his body surged, and the shadow of a giant dragon appeared around him. Boom! With a loud bang, the giant palm of flames fell but was blocked by the giant dragon shadow. It did not harm Qi Yifeng at all. You're too weak. Qi Yifeng roared and his body shook. Suddenly, an endless amount of dragon chi filled the air and turned into countless sharp dragon-shaped blades that blotted out the sky and covered the earth. Not good. Nie Tian and Lian Jiufeng were stunned at the same time. Then, they cried out in shock. Qi Yifeng wanted to break through the barrier. Qi Yifeng's strength was terrifying to begin with. If he was allowed to break through the barrier, there was no telling how terrifying he would become. Stop him! Nie Tian let out a low roar as he activated his heaven-shrouding totem. Endless star power surged out and formed a dazzling starlight shield that filled the entire ward. He was actually planning to forcibly block the Crimson Moon Edge's attack. Lian Jiufeng sensed Nie Tian's actions and roared angrily, "Madman!" He didn't think that Nie Tian would be so fierce. In order to prevent the barrier from breaking, he was actually going to take Qi Yifeng's attack head-on. Lian Jiufeng seemed to hesitate for a moment. Then, a transparent barrier surged out of his body and merged with Nie Tian's heaven-shrouding totem. Of course, he did not care about Nie Tian's life. He cared about the tear of the princess. Nie Tian had obtained the tear of the princess. If he did not merge with it, the tear of the princess would belong to Lian Jiufeng if he died. Unfortunately, Nie Tian had already merged with the tear of the princess. If he died, the tear of the princess would disappear as well. Lian Jiufeng was someone with the vein of 3 lives. He knew the importance of the tear of the princess more than anyone else. Therefore, before he retrieved the tear of the princess, Nie Tian could not die. Bang bang bang! In the next moment, countless dragon shadows bombarded the heaven-shrouding totem. There was a thunderous explosion that seemed like the entire space was about to be destroyed. Glaring cracks appeared on the heaven-shrouding totem, but it did not shatter. Instead, it withstood Qi Yifeng's terrifying attack. At this time, the crowd below was completely stunned. It was hard to imagine that Nie Tian and Lian Jiufeng could unleash such terrifying power. This battle was fierce and exciting. Nie Tian and Lian Jiufeng managed to protect the barrier by working together, but the two of them had suffered serious injuries. Their faces were as white as paper, and blood was dripping from the corner of their mouths. However, Lian Jiufeng seemed to possess a terrifying recovery ability. His complexion instantly returned to normal. Seeing this, Nie Tian could not help but frown. He could feel that Lai Yin Jiufeng was absorbing energy from somewhere else. It was extremely strange. You two ants, your strength has truly astonished me. It was at this moment Qi Yefeng roared. The draconic aura around him actually started to solidify, and he was extremely arrogant. He shouted, "But everything ends here." As soon as he finished speaking, Qi Yefeng's body began to swell, and dense scales appeared all over his body. Chapter 1614. Dragonification. Nie Tian's expression changed when he saw Crimson Yefeng's transformation. Crimson Yefeng was truly dragonifying. It was the same as when Nie Tian's dragon vein was unsealed. His body had turned into a true divine dragon. Oh no! Lai Yin Jiufeng also cried out at the same time. His eyes flashed with undisguisable fear. He growled, "His innate dragon vein is about to break through its limits. Ah! My innate dragon vein has broken through its limits and freed me from the restraints of my physical body. The power of seals is useless against me now. How are you two ants going to fight me?" Crimson Yefeng laughed madly. His voice carried the majesty of a dragon's roar. It turned into invisible waves that resounded through the barrier. Nie Tian, attack! Lai Yin Jiufeng's eyes darkened. Then, he let out a low growl and transformed into a ball of fire. It instantly grew to several hundred meters wide and surged through the air. The surrounding draconic aura seemed to be on the verge of burning up. What a terrifying aura! Nie Tian and Lai Yin Jiufeng were several thousand meters apart. He couldn't help but tremble when he felt the blazing aura the latter released. Lai Yin Jiufeng's strength had exceeded Nie Tian's expectations. It seemed that Lai Yin Jiufeng hadn't used his full strength just now. He had been holding back. Nie Tian didn't even know if Lai Yin Jiufeng was using his full strength right now. Nie Tian, Qi Yefeng won't be able to maintain his dragon form for long. His dragon vein won't be able to withstand such a huge force. You guys just need to hold on for a while. At the same time, Little Fat Cat's voice rang out. Amen, Nie Tian nodded. He also chose to attack at this time. He had to delay Crimson Yefeng's dragonification. By now, Crimson Yefeng's body was several hundred meters long. His body had turned into a divine dragon, and it was still growing. Proud sword art's forbidden move, blood devours the heavens. Without the slightest hesitation, the blood aura around Nie Tian violently shot out. A blood curtain appeared in the air and merged with the sword intent, condensing into a blood-colored sword shadow that was 4,000 to 5,000 meters long. It filled half of the barrier and caused the entire barrier to shake. Kill! With a low roar, Nie Tian slashed down with his sword, and a mighty sword shadow fell down, rubbing against the dragon chi in the air, bursting into dazzling sparks, and blasted straight towards the divine dragon formed by the crimson moon. Boom! The sword shadows were like the sea, crashing down. However, they were blocked by the invisible aura around the divine dragon's body. They suddenly paused in the air, unable to advance even an inch. Nie Tian, you're too weak. Qi Yefeng laughed maniacally as his body continued to expand. Nie Tian felt a huge force rebounding back at him. His whole body suddenly trembled, and he almost couldn't stand. The toughness of the divine dragon's body was beyond his imagination. His attacks couldn't even break through the aura around the divine dragon's body. Boom! At this time, the huge fireball also rushed forward and collided with the violent aura. However, it was only a few dozen meters away from the Crimson Moon Peak and was unable to break through. In ancient times, the body of a god dragon could rival that of a peak paramount god. Although Qi Yefeng's power was still skyrocketing, he had already reached the level of a paramount god. More importantly, after his innate dragon meridians broke through the limit, he was no longer suppressed by the restriction. This was the most fatal thing. Roar! In the next moment, Qi Yefeng roared angrily, and a violent dragon's roar spread out. Waves of air rushed out, and Nie Tian and Lai Yin Jiufeng were knocked back 1,000 meters, both injured. At this time, they couldn't even resist Qi Yifeng's aura. If Qi Yifeng's strength increased a little more, the barrier would probably collapse. At this time, Nie Tian was already feeling a lot of pressure. His forehead was covered in sweat. Luo Xian and Yao Chen were also struggling, and they were about to collapse. Damn it! Lai Yinjiufeng cursed, his eyes flashing as if he was thinking about something. Seeing that Qi Yifeng's body was still growing, Nie Tian's mind worked quickly. If Qi Yifeng's strength reached its peak, they wouldn't have any chance of winning. Will Qi Yifeng's dragon meridians explode on their own if we delay a little longer? Nie Tian suddenly asked as if he had thought of something. Yes. Fat Cat also became nervous. Qi Yifeng's innate dragon meridians aren't strong, but the absolute shadow restriction is. After his dragonification, the dragon meridians are under great pressure. He won't last long. Fat Cat and Lai Yinjiufeng had the same idea. They both knew that Qi Yifeng wouldn't be able to maintain this state for long. But if Qi Yifeng's dragonification was at its peak, Nie Tian and Lai Yinjiufeng wouldn't be able to withstand a single attack. Just his aura alone was enough to oppress them to death. If Qi Yifeng obtained the Terra Source later, he could immediately restore the dragon meridians. This is the only way. Nie Tian's eyes flashed sharply. He then looked at Lai Yinjiufeng and sent a sound transmission. Lai Yinjiufeng, cover me. Let me get close to Qi Yifeng. Lai Yinjiufeng was stunned when he heard Nie Tian's sound transmission. Then, he saw Nie Tian move and swing his sword. He was attacking again. What is this madman trying to do? Lai Yinjiufeng's eyes shook. He didn't know what Nie Tian was trying to do. Nie Tian was crazy. He had used the heaven-shrouding totem to block Qi Yifeng's attack, and now he was trying to get close to Qi Yifeng. He was courting death. He has the tear of the princess inside him. I can't let him die. Lai Yinjiufeng frowned and growled in his heart. He released a mysterious power that spread toward Nie Tian and turned into a transparent barrier that wrapped around Nie Tian. Hovering in midair, Nie Tian swung his heaven slash down with great force. Sword shadows surged like raging waves, rolling and roaring. Ant, do you think you can hurt me with this kind of attack? Seeing Nie Tian charging at him again, Qi Yifeng couldn't help but let out a wild roar. In the next moment, he swung his huge dragon claw at Nie Tian. Several streaks of frosty light appeared, which looked like sharp swords. Nie Tian's expression was dark. There was no fear in his eyes, only extreme killing intent. His figure was very agile, easily dodging the several cold sharp blades, and then he actually dove straight towards the Crimson Moon Peak. What is he doing? Lai Yinjiufeng's eyes darkened when he saw this. Luo Xian, Yao Chen, and everyone else were stunned. They didn't know what Nie Tian was trying to do. Approaching Qi Yifeng at this time was suicide. But Nie Tian was not the kind of person who would seek death, so he must have a plan. ZZZT ZZZT ZZZT. In the air, Nie Tian charged into Qi Yifeng's aura. His ears were filled with ear-piercing sounds. Even with Qi Yifeng's barrier protecting him, he still felt an enormous pressure. It was almost suffocating, but he ignored everything and wanted to get close to Qi Yifeng. Finally, Nie Tian's figure was only a few dozen meters away from the scarlet moon edge. When he saw the pair of dragon eyes that were like the sun and moon, the corners of his mouth curled up into a strange smile. Chapter 16:15. The moment Nie Tian got close to Crimson Moon Peak, he activated Absolute Lock. A terrifying mental intimidation was unleashed and enveloped Crimson Moon Peak like an invisible net. He had risked his life to get close to Crimson Moon Peak to activate Absolute Lock. Absolute Lock was a mental attack formed from the Eye of Galaxy's Absolute Tremble and the holographic Divine Glyph's holographic imprisonment. It was extremely terrifying. However, Crimson Moon Peak was still an expert. Nie Tian had never used Absolute Lock on such a powerful martial practitioner before, so he had to be extremely cautious. Right now, He was only a few dozen meters away from Crimson Moon Peak. If Absolute Lock failed to activate, then he would have nowhere to run. The only road left for him was death. Boom! A huge spiritual wave spread out, causing the space to tremble. At this moment, everyone felt a spiritual attack, causing their hearts to tremble uncontrollably. A mental attack. Lien Jiufeng was closer to Nie Tian, so he felt the mental attack more clearly. He couldn't help but exclaim in shock. He immediately understood what Nie Tian meant. This guy is insane. Lien Jiufeng growled inside. He broke out in a cold sweat for Nie Tian's risky actions. Nie Tian was truly insane. If his mental attack hadn't failed, he would be the one to die. Roar! At the same time, Crimson Moon Peak felt a boundless mental intimidation appear and attack his consciousness. He subconsciously roared angrily, the roar of a dragon resounding through the air. Immediately after, the pair of huge dragon eyes suddenly froze and became lifeless. In an instant, Crimson Moon Peak suffered a huge mental attack. His mind fell into a state of unconsciousness. Success! Nie Tian couldn't help but exclaim in joy when he felt the light in the dragon eyes dissipate. Even an expert like Crimson Moon Peak couldn't endure a mental attack at such a close distance. Crimson Moon Peak didn't think that Nie Tian had approached him to launch a mental attack. Nie Tian, leave now. In the next moment, Little Fat Cat let out a strange cry, reminding Nie Tian to retreat. A corner of Nie Tian's mouth curled up into a smile. Then, he blurred into action and retreated thousands of meters away. What now? Nie Tian's figure stood in midair, staring at Crimson Moon Peak with a burning gaze, not knowing what to do for a moment. The divine dragon's body floated in midair, and its body continued to expand. It was already thousands of meters long. Nie Tian really did not know how long absolute confinement could last. Let's wait for his dragon vein to explode, Fat Cat said solemnly, her eyes trembling nervously. As Qi Yifeng lost control of his divine sense, the dragon vein in his body also lost control and began to crack. As the dragon's vein cracked open, a huge wound appeared on the body of the divine dragon. It was as if it had been cut open from the inside by a sharp blade. Immediately, blood sprayed out. It was extremely bloody. Waves of dragon energy filled the air, surging in the air. His dragon vein is about to explode. Lien Jiufeng growled before retreating to the edge of the barrier. Nie Tian's figure also retreated frantically, trying to stay as far away as possible from Crimson Moon Peak. At this time, Qi Yifeng's huge eyes suddenly trembled and instantly regained clarity. His spiritual sense had finally recovered. Roar! The moment he regained consciousness, he felt intense pain all over his body. He couldn't help but howl in pain. The mournful dragon roar resounded in the air. It was extremely tragic. Qi Yifeng suddenly realized that a large part of his body had cracked open, as if it was about to split open. His eyes could not help but show great fear. Nie Tian, what did you do to me? Qi Yifeng roared as if he had gone mad. His huge body trembled, and he wanted to attack Nie Tian, but he felt an even more terrifying pain. Huge wounds were torn open all over the divine dragon's body like deep ravines. The divine dragon's body was already on the verge of collapse, and it could not hold on any longer. Earth Vein Source, I need the Earth Vein Source. In the blink of an eye, Qi Yifeng came to his senses, and his huge body rolled back toward the source of the Earth Vein. However, his body was already riddled with scars, and large swathes of dragon scales and flesh were falling off. It was a horrifying sight to behold. The air was filled with the pungent and bloody dragon energy. The bloody scene was unbearable to look at. Bang! 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 In the next moment, the dragon vein in Qi Yifeng's body could no longer hold on and directly exploded. His body trembled in the air, turning into large pieces of flesh and blood that fell to the ground. Qi Yifeng used all his strength to open his huge mouth, but he could no longer make a sound. Boom! At this moment, the huge divine dragon body could no longer hold on and suddenly exploded. Blood and flesh flew in the air, and it was extremely tragic. Everyone looked at the scene in the air with trembling eyes. The shock in their hearts could not be any greater. No one would have thought that Qi Yifeng would die in such a way. It was so bloody, so tragic that it was impossible to look at it directly. Qi Yifeng, one of the fated ones, a warrior who had almost broken through the limits of the dragon vein, finally died in an extremely tragic way. Perhaps Qi Yifeng never dreamed that he would die in the hands of Nie Tian in the end. Nie Tian looked at the bloody scene in the air, his eyes determined to kill. Qi Yifeng was dead, but there were too many secrets hidden on his body. Fated one, the absolute shadow restriction, the innate dragon vein. Qi Yifeng had too many things that Nie Tian wanted to know. Nie Tian felt that Qi Yifeng's dragon vein was very strange. Perhaps it was a dragon vein that he had never seen before. Whoosh! Not far away from Nie Tian, Lien Jiufeng exhaled deeply. Now that Qi Yifeng was dead, the matter between him and Nie Tian was next. Nie Tian, you have amazed me once more. Lien Jiufeng looked at Nie Tian, a playful smile returning to his face. There was a trace of disdain in his eyes as he said quietly, "Your martial talent and combat talent are both top-notch. I really can't bear to kill you. Put away your fake attitude." Nie Tian frowned and said cold, "The tear of the princess is something share left for me. You'll have to die if you want it." Nie Tian, you don't know what the tear of the princess is, and you don't know what it means. Lien Jiufeng frowned slightly and said, "I can promise you that as long as you give me the tear of the princess, I will give you the earth vein source. What do you think?" "Nothing." Nie Tian's eyes were murderous as he said cold, "I will not give you the tear of the princess, and I must obtain the earth vein source. Is that so?" Lien Jiufeng's pupils shrank abruptly. He said solemnly, "Greed is not a good thing. Many people have died because of it. I will ask you one last time, are you sure you want to risk your life for something that does not belong to you? I told you, you'll have to die if you want the tear of the princess." Nie Tian's eyes were determined and dark. Cold killing intent radiated from his body. He knew that Lien Jiufeng was not the kind of person who would back down after a few words, so the only choice left for them was to fight. Fool! Lien Jiufeng could sense the determination in Nie Tian's eyes, so he couldn't help but roar angrily. Then, he moved and shouted, "You asked for this, Nie Tian!" Space suddenly shook, and a giant crimson snake appeared behind Lien Jiufeng. Nie Tian's pupils shrank when he saw the giant snake. It was the same giant snake that had appeared in the lava lake earlier. Chapter 16:16. Ancestral Dragon. Nie Tian couldn't help but be stunned when he heard Fat Cat say this name. He was puzzled. He didn't understand why a giant snake would have such a strange name. Look closely, Nie Tian. Doesn't this giant snake look a little familiar? Fat Cat reminded Nie Tian in a low voice. Nie Tian was stunned again. He had just seen this giant snake, so it was very familiar. However, when he carefully observed the giant snake, his eyes couldn't help but tremble. He seemed to have discovered something. This strange snake looks a little similar to Shai. Nie Tian suddenly discovered that the giant scarlet snake actually had a pair of dragon horns on its head. Apart from its body being scarlet red like fire, its entire body and appearance were extremely similar to Shai. Shai was the giant snake that had accompanied Cher in the Destiny Nether Forest back then. The giant scarlet snake in front of him was very similar to Shai. It also had a pair of dragon horns on its head. However, the giant scarlet snake's entire body was burning with flames, and its body was much larger than Shai. Cece should be a giant snake that was with Shui back then. Fat Cat's eyes flashed. Then that's right. This giant snake in front of us is the legendary ancestral dragon. Fat, what's going on? Nie Tian frowned, his eyes trembling violently. Fat Cat had said before that Lien Jiufeng and Cher were of the same status. They both had the meridians of 3 lives, and they both had a horned giant snake by their side. This was definitely not a coincidence. Nie Tian, Cher and Lien Jiufeng are all avatars of the Emperor of the Netherworld. The Emperor of the Netherworld has a companion divine beast, the ancestral dragon. Therefore, every one of his avatars has an ancestral dragon avatar by their side. Fat Cat gave a simple explanation. The giant snake you saw before and this giant scarlet snake in front of you are both ancestral dragon avatars. Nie Tian listened to Fat Cat's explanation, and his frown deepened. He didn't expect the Emperor of the Underworld to be so powerful that even a divine beast by his side had an incarnation, and the incarnation was so powerful. Rumor has it that the ancestral dragon is the second body of the Emperor of the Underworld, and it is connected to his main body by blood. It is equivalent to his second life. As long as the ancestral dragon is alive, the Underworld Emperor will not die. Fat Cat reminded Nie Tian, if you want to defeat Lien Jiufeng, you must defeat the Golden Flame Ancestral Dragon by his side first. This. Nie Tian's eyes trembled, and he could not help but gasp. He had already witnessed the terror of the Golden Flame Ancestral Dragon earlier. It definitely possessed strength close to peak over gods, and it did not seem to be suppressed by the power of restrictions. It was extremely terrifying. With Nie Tian's current strength, it was impossible for him to defeat the Golden Flame Ancestral Dragon. Nie Tian, it's not too late to turn back now. Hand over the tear of the princess, and I can guarantee that you and your friend will be able to leave here safely. How about it? Lien Jiufeng could not help but sneer when he saw the fear in Nie Tian's eyes. He scorned him. Do you think that's possible? Nie Tian was suddenly stunned. His face darkened as he replied coldly. How stubborn! Lien Jiufeng's expression changed drastically. His patience had run out, and the killing intent in his eyes suddenly intensified. He said, if that's the case, then don't blame me for what I'm about to do. With that, Lien Jiufeng stomped off the ground. The Golden Flame Ancestral Dragon behind him rolled and charged towards Nie Tian. In that instant, Nie Tian felt a scorching aura surge towards him, as if it wanted to burn everything away. He frowned and struck out with his sword. A terrifying ball of fire appeared on the edge of the sword. It was the chaotic flames. He felt that since the Golden Flame Ancestral Dragon's power was fire attributed, the chaotic flames would definitely suppress it greatly. Boom! The Golden Flame Ancestral Dragon's aura was as vast as the sea. It charged over and shattered the fiery sword in the air. Then it pounced towards Nie Tian. The chaotic flames did suppress the Golden Flame Ancestral Dragon to a certain extent, but Nie Tian was too weak to do so. That was why the suppression was not as obvious. Oh no! Nie Tian frowned. He abruptly moved and retreated. The 3 barriers had long since been removed. He was not fast, but he was definitely not slow. Hiss! The Golden Flame Ancestral Dragon flicked its tongue in and out of the sky. Then, its giant head suddenly moved, and a fireball as scorching as the sun spat out of its mouth. The power of golden flames! When Nie Tian sensed the terrifying aura of the fireball, his eyes couldn't help but tremble, and he couldn't help but cry out. Nie Tian, run towards the source of the earth! Fat Cat reminded him in a moment of danger. Nie Tian nodded, after which the giant astral soul wings on his back flapped. His silhouette was like a bolt of lightning as he retreated towards the source of the earth. Boom! Nie Tian's silhouette moved agilely, and he skillfully avoided the attack of the fireball. However, the fireball directly collided with the spatial barrier. A violent boom sounded out and the space trembled slightly. A wave of energy that was visible to the naked eye spread out, like a huge circle of ripples. Nie Tian steadied himself and couldn't help but frown. This was the spatial barrier that protected the source of the earth. He didn't expect it to be so strong that even the attack of the Golden Flame Ancestral Dragon couldn't break through it. The Golden Flame Ancestral Dragon stared at Nietian with a fiery gaze. Its giant body was burning with terrifying golden flames, causing the air around it to burn. The crowd on the ground stared at the scene in the sky. Their eyes shone brightly, and they were all worried for Nietian. Hiss! At this moment, the Golden Flame Ancestral Dragon flicked its tongue, and its giant body pounced towards Nietian fiercely once more. The flames around its body became violent, and its entire body turned into a giant sea of flames. It was as if a sea of fire was crashing towards Nietian. Nietian's eyes darkened. He had already retreated to the edge of the spatial barrier, and he was practically in a dead end. There was nowhere for him to retreat to. Nietian, I thought you were a smart person, but now it seems that you're nothing more than an idiot. Lian Jiufeng stared at Nietian from afar with extremely cold eyes. He said, "The tear of the princess is a disgrace to the tear of the princess." Nietian was in no mood to listen to Lian Jiufeng's mockery. He was completely focused on the Golden Flame Ancestral Dragon. Boom! It was at this moment that the Golden Flame Ancestral Dragon's giant body came crashing down. It was like a boundless sea of fire. In an instant, Nietian felt an almost suffocating pressure. It made it difficult for him to even breathe. The terrifying power seemed like it was trying to tear his body apart and burn him alive. Nietian wanted to counterattack, but he discovered that he couldn't even move. The Golden Flame Ancestral Dragon possessed abnormally terrifying power, and it wasn't suppressed by the power of the restriction. Nietian couldn't fight back at all. The Golden Flame Ancestral Dragon's figure instantly came crashing down, and it opened its giant mouth. It was actually trying to swallow Nietian whole. But at this moment, Nietian suddenly felt a profound power surging inside his body. It instantly dispelled the pressure around him. Chapter 16-17. Hovering in midair, Nietian suddenly felt the tear of the princess surge madly through his body. It was actually restoring his power in an instant. The tear of the princess had protected him in a time of danger before, and it had even fused with his body. Nietian could feel that the tear of the princess had caused some subtle changes to his martial body. It was constantly strengthening his martial body. But after the tear of the princess had fused with his body, he could no longer sense its existence. He never thought that the tear of the princess would react again in a moment of life and death. The tear of the princess surged madly through Nietian's meridians and blood. It turned into a mysterious power that was almost violent. Hiss! The Golden Flame Ancestral Dragon seemed to sense something at this moment. Its giant body froze in midair, and it flicked its tongue. It actually didn't dare to take another step closer. Boom! Suddenly, Nietian's body shuddered involuntarily. Then, a ball of holy light surged out of him and forced the Golden Flame Ancestral Dragon to retreat. The holy white light was like a blooming lotus, spreading out bit by bit. Waves of mysterious power circulated in the air, appearing holy and mystical. This is... Lian Jiufeng's eyes shook when he saw this. He cried out inside, "The princess's protection! This kid has actually activated the princess's protection." The tear of the princess was a drop of holy tear formed from the love threads of 3 lives inside the princess. The tear of the princess contained a terrifying power, and it could activate a terrifying protection. But Lian Jiufeng knew that Nietian had only obtained the tear of the princess recently, and it had only been a few days since he had fused with it. Nietian's martial body was ridiculously strong to the point that he was able to activate the princess's protection in just a few days' time. At this time, everyone was stunned by the scene in the sky. Their mouths were wide open, but they couldn't say anything. They didn't know what kind of power was surging out of Nietian's body. But they could sense that the power was extremely pure and holy. It was so pure that it inspired awe. At this moment, the golden flame ancestral dragon seemed to sense something. Its eyes trembled slightly as if it was extremely afraid. With a single movement, it actually retreated and returned to Lai Yanjiufeng's side. Its huge body trembled as if it was shivering. Lai Yanjiufeng frowned deeply. His expression was extremely ugly. The princess's tear within Nie Tian's body had activated the princess's guard. This meant that the princess's tear had fused with Nie Tian's body to the second degree. Lai Yanjiufeng could have forcefully extracted the tear of the princess from Nie Tian's body if it was just the first fusion. However, it was impossible for him to extract the tear of the princess from Nie Tian's body if it was the second fusion. Even if he killed Nie Tian now, he wouldn't be able to obtain the tear of the princess. The degree of fusion of the princess tear was divided into 9 levels, from the 1st to the 9th level. Lai Yanjiufeng originally thought that Nie Tian had only fused with the tear of the princess for a couple of days, so he was definitely only at the first stage of fusion. He never thought that the tear of the princess would activate the guard of the princess. This was the sign of a second stage fusion. Damn it! Lai Yanjiufeng's eyes were dark as he clenched his fists. He couldn't extract the tear of the princess with his current strength. Lai Yanjiufeng needed to be an overgod at the very least to be able to extract the tear of the princess. However, he was only a mid-stage high god right now. Fine, I'll let this kid go for now. We have plenty of time in the future. Lai Yanjiufeng frowned and thought darkly to himself. Then, he looked at Nie Tian and recovered a little. He said, Nie Tian, I didn't think that you would activate the princess's guard. It looks like you've obtained the tear of the princess's acknowledgement. In that case, let the tear of the princess remain with you. Lai Yanjiufeng said these words very reluctantly. In fact, he couldn't even hide the killing intent in his eyes. Nie Tian let out a long sigh of relief, but his lips curled into a cold smile. Of course, he wouldn't believe Lai Yanjiufeng's words. The latter had already tricked him once. He wouldn't fall for it again. He guessed that Lai Yanjiufeng couldn't extract the tear of the princess, so he could only compromise. Lai Yanjiufeng would definitely appear again in the future. He wouldn't give up on the tear of the princess. Lai Yanjiufeng's eyes were as deep as the abyss. A person like him would never give up easily. Nie Tian was very curious about the tear of the princess. Why would Lai Yanjiufeng care so much about it? He really wanted to know the relationship between Cher, Lai Yanjiufeng, and the legendary emperor of the Netherworld. Fat Cat said that Cher and Lai Yanjiufeng were avatars of the emperor of the Netherworld, but Nie Tian couldn't understand what this avatar meant. Was it a clone? Or was it his main body? Or was it a secondary body? Everything was like a giant riddle that no one could figure out. It was at this moment Nie Tian noticed that the golden flame ancestral dragon seemed to have become very weak after being suppressed by the princess's guard. It was very strange. Lai Yanjiufeng waved his hand, and the golden flame ancestral dragon vanished into thin air. You can keep the tear of the princess, Nie Tian, but the Terra source is mine. Lai Yanjiufeng's eyes were filled with killing intent. He then looked at the Terra source. He couldn't get the tear of the princess, but he had to get the Terra source. The Terra source was very important to him. It wasn't just to increase his strength. More importantly, it was related to resurrecting the Emperor of the Netherworld. That's not necessarily true, Nie Tian smiled faintly. The corner of his lips curled into a strange smile. After activating the princess's guard, Nie Tian discovered to his surprise that he had completely recovered his strength. He had even ascended to the late-stage mid-god realm. Nie Tian finally understood why the golden flame ancestral dragon had become so weak all of a sudden. The tear of the princess must have absorbed some of the golden flame ancestral dragon's power and transferred it to Nie Tian. The princess's guard was truly terrifying. You are too greedy, Nie Tian. Lai Yanjiufeng frowned. He was about to lose his patience with Nie Tian. Not only was he not satisfied with the tear of the princess, he wanted the Terra source as well. But in Nye Tian's opinion, he wasn't greedy at all. He wanted the Terra source openly. The tear of the princess belonged to Nye Tian in the first place, and the Terra source was the reason why Nye Tian had come here. Are you calling me greedy? Nye Tianling smiled coldly and stared at Lai Yin Jiufeng. He said coldly, I'm not the greedy one, Lai Yin Jiufeng. You are. If it weren't for me, you would still be trapped in the door of golden flames. I helped you escape, but you didn't repay me. Instead, you tried to rob me. Isn't that greedy? Lai Yin Jiufeng's eyes kept flashing when he heard Nye Tian's words. Nye Tian had helped him escape, but he had also saved Nye Tian's life. That being said, he knew that Nye Tian probably wouldn't have died even if he hadn't intervened. The princess's guard was the reason. Chapter 16-18. Lai Yin Jiufeng did not waste any more words. He charged at Nye Tian in a flash. He was a mid-stage high god and possessed the veins of 3 lives. His strength was not suppressed by the power of the restriction, so he did not fear Nye Tian at all. Boom! Lai Yin Jiufeng thrust his palm forward in midair. An enormous flaming palm appeared and smashed down at Nye Tian like a mountain. Nye Tian's eyes trembled. He reacted extremely quickly and swung his sword. His sword intent surged out and condensed into a vast sword shadow. Boom! The palm and sword collided in midair, causing a huge explosion that shook the very fabric of space. It was obvious that Lai Yin Jiufeng had not used his full strength. He did not want to kill Nye Tian, or rather, he did not dare to kill Nye Tian because the latter possessed the tear of the princess. Lai Yin Jiufeng would not kill Nye Tian before he extracted the tear of the princess. Although he could sense the threat from Nye Tian, the tear of the princess was far more important to him than Nye Tian. Nye Tian did not want to get tangled up with Lai Yin Jiufeng either. He turned around and stabbed at the spatial barrier. Sword shadows surged forward, and a violent boom resounded through the air. Faint ripples spread through the air. The spatial barrier was extremely strange. It showed no signs of breaking under Nye Tian's attack. The golden flame ancestral dragon had attacked the spatial barrier once just now but failed to break it. It was obvious how terrifying the barrier was. At this moment, Yao Qin and Luo Xian's figures also appeared in midair. Their eyes burned as they stared at the spatial barrier, eager to try. Nye Tian, if we cannot break this spatial barrier, no one will be able to obtain the earth vein source. Lai Yin Jiufeng's eyes darkened as he growled. All right, let's break the barrier first. Nye Tian nodded. He then looked at Yao Qin and Luo Xian and said, let's try to weaken the spatial barrier with a barrier. All right. Yao Qin and Luo Xian were both smart people. They immediately understood Nye Tian's meaning and nodded solemnly. Nye Tian, Yao Qin, and Luo Xian stopped hesitating and immediately activated their spirit formations. The 3 spirit formations merged together and turned into a formless energy that filled the outer layer of the spatial barrier. Very good. Lai Yin Jiufeng nodded with a smile when he sensed that the spatial barrier had weakened slightly. He casually raised his hand, and a ball of scorching flames surged in his palm. He thrust his palm forward, and a flaming blade struck the spatial barrier. Boom! With a muffled sound, the spatial barrier shook violently. A gap appeared on it, but it was so small that no one could enter. Moreover, it instantly recovered. Damn it! Lai Yin Jiufeng cursed angrily before launching another palm strike. However, the effect was the same. The spatial barrier was very powerful. Even with the weakening of the 3 barriers, it still couldn't be broken. Lai Yin Jiufeng tried a few more times, but he still couldn't break the spatial barrier. Nye Tian frowned. They were already here, and the earth vein source was already within reach. It would be far too regretful if they couldn't obtain it because of a spatial barrier. Boom! Nye Tian's body trembled when he thought of this. Immediately, a surge of draconic aura spread out and spread toward the spatial barrier. Strands of draconic aura surged on the spatial barrier. Draconic aura could weaken the stability of spacetime. Nie Tian knew this a long time ago. Lien Jiufeng attacked the spatial barrier, but he missed it every time. If he used the draconic aura to weaken it, he should be able to break the barrier. Amen, Lien Jiufeng nodded. His eyes trembled when he sensed that the spatial barrier had weakened significantly. He thrust his palm forward again. Boom! Crack! The flaming blade roared and struck the spatial barrier. After a loud explosion, a glaring crack appeared on the barrier and continued to spread. Bang! In the next instant, the spatial barrier finally couldn't take it anymore and collapsed. Boom! The moment the spatial barrier collapsed, dense Mother Earth origin energy was released and surged through the air. Even the air became much more viscous. The barrier is broken. Lien Jiufeng's eyes trembled when he saw this. A pair of golden flame wings appeared on his back, and he charged forward. He had to obtain the earth vein source no matter what. Lien Jiufeng was extremely cunning. The moment he flapped his wings, 2 flaming blades shot toward Nie Tian and the others. He was the person closest to the earth vein source, but he still had to attack the others and slow them down. Nie Tian's eyebrows furrowed as he summoned his star soul wings. Completely ignoring the flaming blades, he dashed forward. Yao Chen and Luo Xian's figures also moved in an instant, rushing towards the Terra vein origin. Luo Xian was extremely fast. She had activated the Thousand Clouds barrier, but it only covered the spacetime around her. She knew that Nie Tian and Lien Jiufeng had a way to use her Thousand Clouds barrier, so she wasn't going to give them the chance. Luo Xian had the advantage of the Thousand Clouds barrier's speed, so she reached the earth vein source before Lien Jiufeng. In midair, a ball of sparkling and translucent light spun rapidly and continuously released surging Mother Earth vital energy. That ball of light was none other than the earth vein source. Luo Xian was so fast that she left afterimages in the air as she approached the earth vein source. The earth vein source wasn't protected by anything. If Luo Xian obtained it, it would be hers. The earth vein source is mine. Luo Xian's eyes flashed. She could feel her heart beating extremely fast. She didn't know what the earth vein source was, but the fact that Nie Tian and Lien Jiufeng were fighting over it meant that it had to be something extraordinary. More importantly, the earth vein source was what Nie Tian wanted. She felt a sick sense of satisfaction at being able to snatch something from Nie Tian's hands. 1,000 meters. 500 meters. 300 meters. Seeing that Luo Xian was already very close to the earth vein source, Nie Tian's heart was filled with rage. But there was nothing he could do. He was too slow to catch up to Luo Xian. Damn it! Lien Jiufeng roared angrily behind Luo Xian. You evil woman! You want to steal something from me? Impossible. Luo Xian was so fast that Lien Jiufeng and the others wouldn't be able to catch up to her if she stole the earth vein source. I won't let you have the earth vein source even if I have to destroy it. Lien Jiufeng's eyes were murderous. A scarlet flame sword appeared in his hand, and he stabbed it at the earth vein source. Don't! Luo Xian shouted when she sensed the danger, but it was too late. She could dodge Lien Jiufeng's attack, but she couldn't stop him. Boom! The scarlet flame sword struck the earth vein source in the next instant. The translucent ball of light trembled for a moment before being cut in half. The translucent ball of light split in two and shot off in 2 different directions. The earth vein source is mine. Lien Jiufeng's eyes shook when he saw this. He charged toward the closest half of the earth vein source.